What's going on? What's going on today? It is your boy Skywalker the Jedi here on another episode of OG Talk. This is number 5. You know what I'm saying? This should be one of them ones, right? Especially with it being number 5. But the featured guest today is somebody who I hold in very high regard. Like I've watched this man on YouTube well before I started making content, and he's definitely been an inspiration to me, and to now be in this position to be able to, you know, really talk with him and to actually be able to call him a friend is like just super dope to me, and I think it's something really special. And so, we got the main man of the hour, Mr. Zod Ryder. Saying, how you feeling today, Zod?
Man, I'm feeling great. And I just want to say right off the top, thank you to you. And I want to say I am so happy to anytime I get a chance to just sit down and have a conversation and just hang out with you. I'm happy because I consider you to be a really, really close friend. Hell, I consider you to be a brother, and I am like, and the fact, and you are absolutely right. It's like you and I, we've been getting to know each other quite well. I mean, we really do. We've got each other's backs. It's a beautiful thing, and honestly, man, I mean, I couldn't be happier with that with our friendship and with the way we're progressing like as a group with all our friends now.
Yep.
Man,
Network.
What a beautiful time to be alive. That's all I got to say about that, really.
Seal Nation and the Mikey verse. You know what I'm saying? It's a train that cannot be stopped.
No.
You need to either get on it or get ran over. You know what I'm saying? Yo, Zod, I really wanted to have you on here because you are somebody that has been here since the beginning, yo, and that's really the focus of this OG Talk series, right? Is to highlight those of you that was like really there in the beginning of this whole release the Snyder Cut, restore the Snyderverse movement. And I think it's important to me that you guys are highlighted. And so I'm just, trying to really do my part in making sure that you guys' efforts didn't go in vain and unnoticed.
Well, I have to say you're doing a beautiful job because these last 4 episodes of OG Talk that you've had prior to this one have been fantastic, have been amazing, and everybody contributes. This is the thing that you should be getting from these OG Talks is, and what everybody should get is that Release the Snyder Cut was a collective effort of a lot of very talented, motivated, and just awesome individuals, some great human beings that set aside a lot of stuff that a lot of things that they had going on in their lives, to devote their time to the movement in so many ways that people just do not understand. And this is what it is. When you're dedicated to a cause and you are in it for the right reasons, you accomplish your goals. And this is one of the reasons why Release the Snyder Cut was a successful movement and why Restore the Snyderverse, in my mind, is a successful movement. I mean, I don't care what haters and negative people say. When you have a collective group of people that are like-minded and willing to go the distance, you're going to have a lot of success.
Oh yeah, most definitely. And I think that is one thing that has definitely contributed to us being successful in these endeavors is that, people were able to put aside a lot of things for the betterment of the movement, right? Um, you, we wouldn't have really gotten the results that we did if, everybody hadn't been doing that. So I think that that's one thing that's super dope about our community. right? And can you just expound upon more? So why you think that it is so important, um, above other things, for us to be able to put our differences aside? Because I think that when everybody's fighting, it's a lot harder to kind of get things done. Wouldn't you say that that's the case?
One of the things that made Release the Snyder Cut such a strong force to be reckoned with was that it wasn't just a Twitter handle. It was it became, and I'm not exaggerating here because speaking for myself, Release the Snyder Cut literally became a lifestyle. You were 24/7, you were living, breathing, eating Snyder Cut, Snyder Cut, Snyder Cut. You were participate if you were really in the movement at that time, you were participating in all the campaigns you could participate in. You were on social media hashtagging, you were working behind the scenes, you were helping to set up events, it was literally everything you were doing. To me, it felt almost like, I don't want to say like a second job, but in a lot of ways it felt like it dominated so much of, for me personally, who I was at the time and what I was doing, that I really didn't, when it came to free time, I didn't consider any of my free time really free time because it was devoted to the movement, and
Absolutely,
the movement was where I wanted to be and who I wanted to, and these were people I wanted to be around. These were
absolutely,
people I felt were believed in the same things that I did, at least as far as this movement for Zack Snyder and for AFSP and for everything we were trying to accomplish, because it wasn't just about getting the cut. That's the thing a lot of people don't understand. And if you read some of the articles and some of the hit pieces that came out around that time, you'll understand that the fan base was completely belittled. The movement was a punchline
absolutely.
for a lot of these big trades like the Wall Street Journal, the Ringer, um, you know, Variety, you name it.
And it
They
was on YouTube to see, because like, look,
Yeah,
even with
oh yeah.
me, like,
Hmm.
because I was a bit of an outsider, right, of like, the movement, in terms of, I was like donating money and I was watching YouTube content, right? That's how I was kind of contributing, right? And so, um, even so, in just that, it felt like a second lifestyle, right? Where, you know, so much of my free time was dominated by just watching YouTube content, or trying to research AFSP stuff. And that's why I was buying all the t-shirts, and just doing everything that I could, right, in my spare time. And so, Zod is absolutely right when he describes it that way, because that's exactly what it feels like, is a second job. Like, it really did consume a lot of time, effort, and money. Absolutely. And I think that that is one thing that really helped us be successful versus a lot of these other fandoms, that didn't really follow our same model.
Well, Release the Snyder Cut. You know how they say that Zack Snyder is the blueprint, right? Release the Snyder Cut is the blueprint for how you amass an army of fans, how you get them together, and how you get them to work towards a specific goal. The mobilization of Release the Snyder Cut should be something that every other group that really wants to accomplish something through social media, through various campaigns. Again, hashtag release the Snyder Cut was the blueprint and is something which is one of the reasons why, Restore the Snyderverse has the impact that it's having now, because you have so much of Release the Snyder Cut carrying over. Although I will say this, it's not as mobilized as Release the Snyder Cut was. Release the
I
Snyder
agree.
Cut, when you compare the two,
I agree.
Release the Snyder Cut was a lot stronger,
It was
because
a
at that time,
well-oiled machine, yo.
you at that time, Release the Snyder Cut, you had people that knew what they were doing. You had people that from, again, we're talking about a movement that features people from all walks of life, all corners of the globe, all sorts of professions. And we're talking about artists, graphic designers, you know, um, uh, newspaper columnists, any profession you could think of. You would have people that were in this movement and were devoted to this cause tooth and nail, not just because of they wanted Zack Snyder's Justice League, but because they also wanted to contribute to AFSP, which, again, Americans for Suicide Prevention it was the main driving force behind Release the Snyder Cut. It was the main thing that separated Release the Snyder Cut from a lot of other social media induced movements that we got. You see, because when people and the thing I find so ironic about it is a lot of things that we get now from all of these, you know, like trades and stuff, when they talk about Release the Snyder Cut, they don't talk about the charities that we did. They don't talk about all the money that we raised for suicide prevention. They talk about the fandom as being toxic. And the reason they talk about the fandom as being toxic is not because the fandom is actually toxic, but because the fandom was so mobilized, so organized. This fandom gets things done. And
Yep.
when you're a fandom that can get things done, and you're a fandom that can push forth and make things happen, that scares a lot of these companies, because you have multi-million-dollar companies that cannot trend the way we can.
Multi-billion.
Multi-billion, yeah, exactly. And you have all of these things that happen, and they don't have the kind of control that this Release the Snyder Cut fan-made grassroots movement was able to do. I mean, just recently there was, I think it was Rolling Stone that said that 13% of Release the Snyder Cut's Twitter followers were bots. 13%. So if you're gonna say 13%, that means about between 85 and 87% are real fans. So if you're talking about, and Twitter is full of bots anyway. We're just talking about Twitter. We're not talking about any other social media platform.
And if you don't believe that, look to this Elon Musk and Twitter deal right now that's going on. That's being held up over bots.
There's a reason why that thing with Elon Musk is going on right now, because when you look at that and you realize that, hey, 13% of this massively powerful movement that got this multi-billion-dollar corporation motivated enough to release this cut of this movie that they did not want to be released. When you think about it, releasing the Snyder Cut unleashed Pandora's box.
Oh no, it absolutely did.
On a level that nobody expected. In fact, I would go as far as to say, and this may be controversial, I would go as far as to say that the Snyder Cut was one of the reasons why this merger happened. Because when you look at when you look at what we were able to do, and when you look at what Release the Snyder Cut proved, when this movie came out, it made everybody who was in charge that
Look
didn't
silly.
want didn't want Zack Snyder's vision. It made them all look like morons.
Yeah.
And now it makes sense as to why, you know, Warner Brothers needed to merge with a different company and get new management in there,
Yeah.
because that, you know, failure after failure, they're hemorrhaging money, and they're just doing stupid thing after stupid thing after stupid thing. And you cannot do that and maintain, you know, fiscal viability for any lengthy period of time.
Yeah.
So
I think that's
again,
why they went out of their way to not promote it.
oh
Right?
yeah,
Is
yeah,
they were
because they knew it
afraid
was
of,
making them look bad. It was making
yeah,
them
it was
look
making them
bad,
look bad.
and again, I kind of I always say, well, if you're worried about you know, Zack Snyder's Justice League making you look bad as a company, why did you release it in the first place? You're not gonna release something that's gonna make you look bad unless you know that you screwed up on a
And it's gonna make you
colossal level,
and it's gonna make you
and now this is gonna make you more money. Because think about it, on paper, the failure of 2017's Justice League, for example, there's no way in the world that there should have been another cut of that movie released. That movie was a colossal failure in every way, shape, or form. Failed movies on that level that cost that much money oftentimes do not receive director's cuts. It just
no.
doesn't happen. And you're not gonna and judging from the fact, you know, when you look at the night and day nature of Zack Snyder's Justice League versus the 2017 theatrical release, they are two totally different films. Completely. Nobody with half a brain can look at those two, watch those two movies back to back and say, yeah, they're the same film.
Impossible, yo. But look, I want to get started back at like the start, right?
Mm-hmm.
What movie was it, right? That really made you a fan of Zack Snyder, right? And around what time period did that whole thing play out in?
For me, the first major movie to get me into Zack Snyder was 300.
Mm.
When I saw 300, I saw 300 in a theater with a woman I was dating at the time. And it was a glorious theatrical experience. We were in one of those theaters that had, you know, the recliner with the where you could recline, and they served you drinks and food while you were sitting in the theater. I believe the theater is actually called Hollywood Theater. I think that's what it was called. And and I remember seeing 300. I remember being blown away. I remember wanting to find more of, you know, Zack Snyder as a director. I'd seen that he directed some video releases about Michael Jordan back in his early NBA days, and there was some other stuff, and then I of course Dawn of the Dead, which
Yeah.
I actually sought out when I found out about Dawn of the Dead. I sought out the director's cut of Dawn of the Dead, because everything that I'd read about it said, oh, you got to see Zack Snyder's director's cut. You got to see his director's cut of Dawn of the Dead. And it was fantastic. I loved it. And I'd been a fan of Zack Snyder ever since. I caught Watchmen in the theaters as well. And for me, when I saw Watchmen, I'll never forget, it was, I believe it opened on my birthday weekend, because my birthday is in March, and the movie came out, and I'll never forget, because I was sick as a dog the day that I went to the movie theater to watch the movie. I was suffering. I had a stuffy nose. I was all messed up. I had a really bad head cold, and I just remember being blown away by Watchmen because I was always a fan of, Alan Moore's original comic source material, and I loved everything that Zack Snyder did in Watchmen. And a lot of people at that time when Watchmen came out, a lot of people didn't get it. It was too much
Yeah,
for people. They didn't like it because it doesn't have, the squid ending that Alan Moore has in the original comics.
yeah,
So people hated it because of that. But the thing I never got and never understood was, but this is literally panel for panel of the actual book. If you look at Watchmen,
outside of the squid, right?
this movie is literal outside of the squid. And then what tripped me out was when Dave Gibbons went and drew Zack Snyder's ending to Watchmen the same way, he did the original artwork for the original ending, and he did it in that same exact style, and he included it in one of the Watchmen art books so that you could see it as, that it could actually work as a comic book ending as well. So for me, going into Zack Snyder, in other words, the whole point I'm trying to make is I've been a diehard fan of Zack Snyder's ever since. I never looked back, and when it was announced that he was gonna do Man of Steel, the only reason that I was a little bit apprehensive about Man of Steel at first was because we had just come off of Superman Returns,
Yeah,
and Superman Returns was such a colossal letdown.
he didn't throw one punch, yo.
I mean, but not even. I mean, it was just a letdown. And my thing is, if you look at Superman Returns, there's a good movie in there somewhere.
He didn't throw one punch, son.
We just didn't see that movie. Like there were good intentions, but it just didn't materialize well.
Can't have,
So
you can't have a Superman movie and he not fight. In my eyes, yo, you
well,
can't.
I and from what I heard, there was some scenes that Bryan Singer had shot that took place on Warworld where Superman actually did get to fight, but those scenes were cut out of the movie.
I mean,
All
look,
I don't
I
know.
think it would be impossible for him to shoot a movie like a Superman movie entirely without a fight scene. So I can believe that. And I can also see a studio at that time saying, he's on another planet, right?
Well,
Yeah,
because apparently Bryan Singer's director's cut for Superman Returns is superior to what we got theatrically. But I'm not surprised because the theatrical cut of Superman Returns is mid at best. But again, so that was the only reason why I was a little bit apprehensive going into Man of Steel, not because of Zack Snyder, because I know Zack Snyder is visual and capable, but I was nervous because I didn't know where they were going to go with it. But then I saw the
yeah.
first trailer for Man of Steel, and any reservations I had about what I thought it might be all dissipated immediately. So I can honestly say that my experience with Zack Snyder, and there's a reason that Zack Snyder is my favorite director because everything that he does, I've enjoyed. I can't say enough. I mean, I can't say that about every director that I love. Even some of my other favorite directors have made movies that I didn't like. Like I'm a big John Woo fan, and he's made a lot of great movies that I love, but he's also made a lot of movies that I don't particularly care for. Uh, Martin Scorsese's another one who's made a lot of great movies, but then he's got a few in there that I could be like, okay. But Zach, I have never had a problem with anything. Every movie that he's come out with, I've enjoyed. Even the movie he made on his phone, Snow Steam Iron. So again, he made it with his phone the same way you do your streams with your phone. So I listen. I don't. When you got a man that can make a movie like that on his phone, man, make it look as good as Zach managed to make it look. I mean that's talent that's unrivaled. I don't know any director that can do that, and I don't know any director that has the intimate relationship with his fan base that Zack Snyder does.
Yeah, man. Most definitely, yo. I mean, my two favorite directors have only made bangers. You know what I'm saying? Zach and Christopher Nolan. Because Chris ain't missed in my eyes. I don't care what none of y'all say. Chris ain't missed. You know what I'm saying? But okay, now I want to say, oh what? Hey, Nas, you better not have nothing to say about no Christopher Nolan movie. You know what I'm saying? Because I might have to.
Well, no, because Christopher Nolan brought Zach in. Okay, we wouldn't have these masterpiece DC movies.
Goats recognize goats.
That's true. That's very true.
Facts.
You know?
Now, yeah, I just had to get your take on that side. You know what I'm saying? Now, look, before we get into the Man of Steel stuff, I want to ask you this. What would you say that it is about Zack Snyder and his style of filmmaking, right, that really separates him from everybody else in your eyes?
I think with Zach, you can instantly recognize that he's a visionary. It's not just because he has an amazing, second to none visual prowess, but this man knows how to tell a compelling comic book story. And even if you don't think that he does a good job telling, a good comic book story, you look at, just for an example, you look at 300, which is based off of a comic book, and you look at Watchmen, and you look at how he adapted both of those comic book graphic novels, and
From page to screen, yo.
it's unbelievable. I mean, for me, I love Zach as a filmmaker because everything that he puts out, you can tell comes from his heart. Zach doesn't go halfway on anything. He either goes all in or not at all. And that's why when they kept they wanted him to compromise on Justice League, compromise. He didn't want to compromise because again, I've got my vision. And what was it he had said? If he had to use any scenes for his Justice League that were from Joss Whedon, he would have burned it. He would have burned them.
He said, "I would rather burn my movie than use one frame that I didn't photograph."
That's right. That's what he said. Why? because he has this confidence. This confidence, Skywalker. There's that word confidence. There's people out there that actually have problems with people who are confident, which is something I'll never understand. But hey, that's just me.
Me either, yo. Yeah, I think that Zach's visual flair, right, is obviously something that can easily kind of be seen that separates him from most filmmakers in history, right? He might be one of the best visual storytellers of all time, right?
Yes.
And that's no small feat, right? But what I really think is another thing that makes him truly unique is his meticulousness and level of detail, yo. Just in each frame. Like, if you go back and you watch a movie like Batman vs Superman, right? Almost every frame of that movie is like a painting, yo. It's crazy, right?
Yep.
Like, pretty much almost every single scene, right? And especially so when you merge his visual flair with the comic book movie medium, I think that's where he's in his wheelhouse and he really plays the best, right? Out of everything that he's done, I would say those are his best movies.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. But to this day, in my mind, Zack hasn't made any bad movies. And, you know, I that's why I don't, you know, I don't I fail to understand a lot of people's criticisms of Zack Snyder. Because it's one thing if you don't like his films, but when you attack the man on a personal level because you don't like the way he handled a character that you like, I think that's where, the line needs to be drawn because um I you know there's a reason why every single person that's ever worked with Zack Snyder is excited anytime they get the chance to work with Zack again.
Absolutely.
He genuinely cares about his cast and crew and anybody that works with him. He cares
Hey,
about them, and he
I've never
always has
seen
fun with making his movies.
I've never seen a director that had an actor in one of his movies get up on Comic Con with a "I love you" shirt, you know, dedicated to a director. Like I've never seen, you know, Jamie Foxx wear a "I love Quentin Tarantino" T-shirt. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know,
Right.
or like something of that nature. So, definitely there seems to be a kinship between um him and the people that he works with that seems to be on another level.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah. Okay, so going into Man of Steel, right? You were speaking about the trailer and when you first saw it and how it pretty much alleviated all of your concerns. Like what was your excitement level going into Man of Steel, right? And how did you feel coming out of that?
I was extremely hyped going into Man of Steel. I had gone to see it with my best childhood friend that I grew up with. My friend, we went to see this movie together, and we both absolutely loved it. I thought it was great, and it came out around Father's Day, and so then I went with my father for Father's Day that year when the movie came out. We went and we saw Man of Steel, and my dad loved it. So right there, okay, now you have this connection, not only because I love the filmmaker and I love the visuals and I love the story and I love Henry Cavill as Superman and I'm all excited, but now my dad is into it too. My dad is looking forward to the next one and what's going to happen next. This was a great movie. All the characters were good. Michael Shannon, you know, stole the show every time he came out as General Zod. It was fantastic. And again, this
Where
was
did you train?
and
On a
this
farm?
exactly. And this was the thing. I got in. So the thing was, I'd seen it in the theater. I'd seen Man of Steel in the theater about 5 times.
Yeah.
And I was very pleased. I loved it. I couldn't wait for it to come out on home video. And to tell you the truth, if Man of Steel were still playing in theaters today, I couldn't tell you how many times I would go watch the movie. I would be there every free day that I had. I'd be seeing it again. That's how much I love Man of Steel. It is a masterpiece in my opinion.
Where do you think Man of Steel ranks like in like Zach's pantheon of comic book movies?
It's my favorite of all of them.
Oh yeah.
Man of Steel is my favorite movie, but again, I have this issue with Zach's DC movies where I think you and I think you and I kind of share this where it just kind of depends on what mood you're in and
Yeah.
and which one you're going to watch because like I could say that, Man of Steel just off the top is my favorite. Not just Man of Steel is my favorite comic book movie of all time. But then the problem is, then you have BVS and you have Zack Snyder Justice League. So because we've got three fantastic films, any one of those could be considered your favorite comic book movie of all time,
Yeah,
and nobody could fault you for it because I saw BVS in theaters 7 times,
yeah,
and I absolutely loved it. My one regret is they had a Fathom Events near me, and I didn't have the chance to go see. And this was when they had Zack Snyder's
oh my God,
uh,
yeah, I
director's cut ultimate edition in theaters. It was a
yeah,
Fathom Events, and it
yeah,
was one night only, and I
me
didn't
too,
get to see it,
me
and I
too.
and I regret that. But I did see the theatrical
Oh
cut
my
in
God,
theaters a bunch of times.
yo, we actually share that because I really wanted to go, but like it was at a point where because I was still in my grind and come up phase at that point. You know what I'm saying? And like I was gonna get paid like in a couple days, and I was gonna get my ticket, and then like it sold out, and I was so mad, and I was like, yo, I couldn't go. But yeah. As for my favorite, mine it always teeters back and forth between BVS and the Snyder Cut. I mean, I love the Man of Steel, but BVS just really hit different for me, right? Because of my like my affinity for Batman and Ben Affleck, man. I
Yeah,
just I just never expected that he was gonna be the greatest Batman of all time. Like
I never did either, and I'm with you with that on that 100%. I mean, that's why it's hard for me. So when I say Man of Steel is my favorite comic book movie of all time, it's hard because then I look at BVS and I say, but no, but BVS is so good too. It's like
yeah,
you
man.
can't pick. So you gotta kind of be a chameleon with those three movies.
See, look, because BVS, another reason why it hit different for me is because that's when you started getting Junkie XL and Chris Terrio. You know what I'm saying? So I'm just like, oh my God, some of that dialogue in BBS, man, it's just,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
really cool.
nobody cares about Clark Kent taking on the Batman. Lines like that. I mean,
Dude, just the whole section where they're discussing Superman on TV, right? Like,
yes.
man, like, must
Exactly,
there be
exactly,
a
ex-
Superman? Oh my
exactly how it would be if Superman were in our world, which is
and
another reason why Man of Steel, BVS, and Zack Snyder's Justice League
it,
it's the greatest incomplete. It's the greatest incomplete series of movies of all time. Let's just
yeah,
put it that way.
yeah, yo, and it's crazy because don't even get me started on the Lex Luthor scene with Superman at the end of the movie on top of the roof or whatever. But,
Uh-huh.
right? Yeah, but it always goes back and forth between those two with me. But I do understand why Man of Steel is some people's favorite. But going back to Man of Steel, right? So obviously you're loving the movie, right? You go see it 5 times, and it is holding a really special place in your heart at that time. How did you feel when the backlash to Man of Steel started happening, right? And
I
how did
started
you know?
seeing that instantly
Yeah,
with friends that I had surrounded myself with at the time. I was doing a podcast with a group of individuals called the Roundtable Show at the time. This was a weekly podcast that we did on Sundays, and it was something where, and this is where I kind of started to have my falling out with these guys because they were extremely critical of Man of Steel, and it got to the point where this was the first time I mean, because I'd seen, I'd remembered the backlash
This is
that
the
Zach,
first time you
that
saw some
Zach,
antis, huh?
well, yeah, because here's the thing. I remember the backlash that Zack Snyder got for Watchmen. I mean, who could forget that backlash? That backlash was ridiculous. But when you look at, but that was nothing. But the backlash for Watchmen was nothing compared to the backlash for Man of Steel. Because I don't know about you, but I was surrounded by a bunch of people who I thought appreciated cinema and knew what they were talking about. But the way that they would, take a dump on Zack Snyder for Man of Steel because they had copious issues with the movie. They didn't like Jonathan Kent. They didn't like the way the way Henry Cavill's take on the character. They thought Superman was too dour. There was even a few people that were literally upset because Superman didn't have the underwear on the outside. And I literally, to me, I'm gonna say that at that moment I realized, but I didn't have any clue, but I realized that it was gonna be tough, you know, being a Zack Snyder fan, because
Yeah,
you're gonna get this kind of stuff where people are coming at you over
red underwear.
red underwear. I mean, I'm just, but again, but that was my first real taste of, I guess, what backlash would be like moving forward, because once we get to BVS, all bets are off. I mean, we're talking about, I've had friendships end
Wait,
over BVS.
wait,
All right.
don't start going to BBS yet. You know what I'm saying? Because BBS is like that is the tipping point, right? That's what that definitely was. So obviously, after Man of Steel is released, you're loving it, right? But you are hearing about all this backlash, all right? Now you hear that the follow up to Man of Steel will be a Batman versus Superman movie. All right. How are you feeling at that point?
At that point, I was just like everybody else. I was jumping out of my skin with excitement. I couldn't wait. The Harry Lennox Dark Knight Returns monologue in Hall H at Comic Con to announce Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. I mean, it was literally one of the greatest comic book announcements of all time. I think it's still probably the greatest comic book movie announcement of all time. With the way Harry Lennox read that, I mean, oh my goodness, it was insane. And to me, I was so hyped for Batman v Superman that I purchased the the digital version of the movie before the movie came out, because Voodoo had put up pre-orders for Batman v Superman, and you were promised, when if you ordered it, you got the Ultimate Edition with it. It was already bundled, and this was before the movie hit theaters.
Yeah, no, they
This
literally
was like this
announced
was
there
like
was
this
going
was
to
like a good
be,
month before.
bruh,
Yeah.
I always tell people that they literally announced that there was going to be a Ultimate Edition before the movie came out.
Which I think is weird marketing, but
Very weird, right? And that's what we'll get into that. But so all right, so you're super hyped, just like the rest of us are after that Comic Con Hall H video with the logo reveal, and everybody loses their minds, right? Um, where are you mentally when you start hearing about the casting announcements, like Ben Affleck and Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman? With those two characters.
you know what? I really wasn't. I really, it really, none of it really bothered me, to tell you the truth. Um, I know that, historically, a lot of people have problems every time. Batman is recast. There's always a level of backlash. But for me, I wasn't worried about Ben Affleck because I'd seen him play Daredevil for Marvel, and I actually thought he did a pretty good job with the role. I didn't hate his portrayal of Daredevil the way a lot of people did, and I knew
It was
that
the movie.
it was the movie that was
Yeah,
bad. It wasn't Ben Affleck's portrayal.
yeah,
Okay, and here's the other thing too. There's a director's cut of that movie.
yeah.
Okay, that is actually quite a bit better from what we got theatrically for Daredevil. So I'm
Yeah.
just saying, I'm noticing a little bit of a
Trend.
trend going on here where it seems like if these studios would just release the director's cuts in the first place, a lot of movies would do a lot better for
Yeah.
real. And I don't know, and I don't know why they don't learn this. But anyway, for me, I didn't
Maybe
really
Zach
have
just taught him, Zod. Maybe
maybe
Zach
because
just
again,
taught him.
Zach is the blueprint. But
Yeah.
but what I'm saying here is, there were a lot of people upset about Ben Affleck. I mean, totally losing their minds about Ben Affleck playing Batman in a bad way. And not only that, there was like some sort of a petition with like thousands and thousands of signatures to remove Ben Affleck from the film. I mean, I couldn't believe it. Now, I knew people that were like that kind of took issue with Ben Affleck being some of the people who were on the podcast that I was on took severe issue with Ben Affleck being Batman. But I just, like I said, it didn't really bother me because, again, we've had several actors up to that point play Batman. So really, Ben Affleck is not by any means the worst choice you could go with. I mean, come on, let's be real. This is a guy that, has shown that he could play a superhero before. And I had read somewhere that Ben Affleck said that he agreed to play Daredevil because he didn't think he would ever get the opportunity to play Batman. So that was, so for me, and I knew that Ben Affleck is a fan and knows the material. So I wasn't really worried about him. And again, Gal Gadot, hadn't seen Gal Gadot in enough stuff to really be able to make a judgment one way or the other, whether or not she'd be a good Wonder Woman. I'd seen her in, the Fast and the Furious stuff that she'd been in. And I mean, she really didn't impress me all that much, but at the same time, I didn't really feel like that was really enough to judge her as an actress. So I really didn't take issue with Wonder Woman either. So to me, I mean, BVS was, I just was going to wait for the movie and, make my judgment then. And even then, okay, and I believe my original review for Batman v Superman is still on Facebook somewhere. I think I gave the theatrical cut an 8 out of 10. And this was the theatrical cut. This wasn't even the ultimate edition, my friend. And it got an 8 out of 10 from me. I loved it. I still love it. I still think it was good. But the thing is once you've seen the ultimate edition, you can never go back to the theatrical cut because
I've never seen it since.
No, because the theatrical cut is clearly inferior to Zach's preferred version. And I'm being honest here. I've not seen the theatrical cut since I seen it in theaters. I never watched it on home video. It was always the ultimate edition for me.
Yep.
And
I had both.
And it's going to stay that way.
Look, and they made sure that they sold that shit with all the versions too. Like they made sure that the ultimate came with the theatrical. You know what I'm saying? And like I never used that thing, man. When you would order it on Blu-ray, you would get the theatrical on like a regular DVD. And it was pretty ridiculous. But
and that DVD would stay brand new in the case because you would never take it out. It would never be touched by human hands. So
I actually gave it away a few times, because I had like multiple versions. I always gave it away.
oh yeah, man, and that's what I like to do too. I love to give away copies if if I've got, if I've already got whatever, and
Yeah,
yeah,
I
yeah,
would keep the Blu-ray and give away the DVD.
the DVD, yeah,
You know what I'm
yeah.
saying?
So it's for me, BVS is another masterpiece. I do not look at BVS and say that it's inferior to Man of Steel. I think for me, the reason why Man of Steel edges everything out for me is just because of the personal connection that I had to
Yeah,
the movie.
yeah.
And because I went with my father to watch Man of Steel for
Father's
Father's
Day.
Day.
Yeah,
And I genuinely I just really loved how I felt, when I left that theater, amped up for Superman again. And again, but again, BVS is in no way, shape, or form a lesser movie. That's the thing. So I can't sit here and tell you that I, I would I would really prefer one or the other. Again, you can watch any of these movies at any time and feel great about any one of them. So it's for me, BVS was amazing, and nobody was more surprised about the backlash for that movie than me.
oh my goodness. Wait, let's not get to the backlash yet, right? All right, so you're super hyped, right?
Uh-huh.
Um, the movie is about to come out or whatever. You start seeing the trailers, all right?
Oh. Mhm.
Um, how did the trailers make you feel for BBS?
The trailers were some of the best trailers I'd ever seen, too. I mean, coming off of, you're coming off of Man of Steel, and then you're seeing these trailers for this epic movie that not only features Batman but Superman as well. The one mistake I think the marketing team made for BVS was by showing
Doomsday.
Wonder Woman and Doomsday. I don't think that they should have did that. I think Wonder Woman and Doomsday should have been left as a surprise for when the movie was actually released, because most of the promotional material was just Batman and Superman like staring each other down and or throwing punches at one another. So it wasn't like they really needed to showcase Gal Gadot right away or anything. They could have left Wonder Woman a surprise and
Did
left
they show
Doomsday
her
a
in the Comic Con
surprise.
trailer?
I I want to say that they did, because they
Yo,
not the teaser, but I think the actual trailer that they put out just before the movie came out, I think they did.
man, no, I'm talking about that Comic Con trailer, that 3 minute and 40-second trailer. That to me is the greatest movie trailer of all time, yo.
I
That was
agree.
the one man's reign of terror. You know what I'm saying? Day versus night. Oh my god.
The idea of a movie having the stones to essentially make Batman the villain of the story,
Yeah, thanks.
I thought was just phenomenal.
Yeah,
I
great.
mean,
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh, go
wow,
ahead.
wow! Like anybody, and that's why I say when you look at the way Ben Affleck portrays that character, I mean, he knocks Batman out of the park.
Yeah,
He's the best live action Batman we've ever had. He personifies Batman in a way that nobody else has ever done in any movie or whatever. It's like he jumps right off the pages of the comic book. He's perfect for the role. I mean, not only as Batman but as Bruce Wayne.
Bruce Wayne. Yeah,
He just nails it 1000%. I mean, I don't know how anybody can have a problem with his portrayal. I feel like he is picture perfect in every way for that character. And to me, I'll never. I don't think there will ever be a better on-screen portrayal. I just
Especially when he's
cannot see it.
getting shot with Zach's lenses. You know what I'm saying? So
Exactly.
yeah. All right. So the trailers are knocking your socks off, even though you think that they showed a little bit too much by showing Wonder Woman and Doomsday. Um, like, how did you feel going into the movie, and versus how you felt coming out of that movie?
I'm going to tell you right now, my level of excitement, like I told you, I bought the movie, I purchased the movie digitally before I seen it in the theater. I was so hyped for this movie. It was like I actually felt like, and I actually remember saying this. I think I said this to my brother. I think I told him, I said, I told my brother, I'm like, I think Batman v Superman is going to be the greatest movie of all time. I said this to him based on the trailers that I'd seen.
Yeah.
And I'm not just talking about comic books. I'm
No.
talking about
Yeah.
the greatest movie of all time, like the greatest cinematic experience of all time. I mean, this movie had so many layers to it. There was so much depth. There was so much to see. There was so much to digest. This was a movie that was worth going back to see the theater. There's a reason I seen it in the theater 7 times, because this is a movie you want to go back and see over and over and over, because every time you go to see it, it's like Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back. Every time you watch it, you get something new from it that you missed. No matter how minute the detail, you're there. You're like, okay, this is the greatest thing. This is the greatest thing I've ever seen. This is insane.
Not only every time that I watch it, especially back then, was I getting something new, but I've seen these movies, God knows how many times, right? Mm-hmm. Every time I've done an OG talk, I've learned something new about these movies that I never noticed the last time, or any time before I've ever seen it. So it's been crazy that, these movies have so many layers. You are absolutely right. They demand to be rewatched.
Absolutely.
Right. So look, you're feeling like it's about to be the greatest movie ever going into it, right? Afterwards, did you feel like you were validated feeling like that?
I felt like, I'll tell you, the thing was, I'd gone to see it with my dad. The first time I saw it, I watched it with my dad.
But it wasn't on Father's Day this time. That's why it wasn't as special.
No, but here's the thing. I looked at him and I said, and this is so funny because the credits were rolling, and I looked at my dad and I said, did you think that this was better than Man of Steel? And he looked at me and he said, no, I didn't think it was better than Man of Steel. He said, I think it was on that level, but I don't think it was better.
Yeah.
And I thought about that. I'm like, yeah, same energy, thinking like, in terms of an epic, grand scale of a film, but not necessarily better, because again, you could argue a little bit that maybe the stakes were a little higher in Man of Steel. Maybe a little bit, because you had the Kryptonians, and then you had, the world engine. So you could argue that maybe, but then when you look at Batman v Superman, you're like, I don't know, because then you've got Lex Luthor, and you've got Doomsday, and you've got, I don't know. All I know is that I was blown away the first time I watched BVS. And the only thing I was thinking about was, when I left the theater that first time, was I cannot wait to watch this movie again.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about. That's the difference between some of these movies, and when you've seen a great film
I'll
and
watch it again.
because when your first thought after you watch it is not really about the movie itself, but you're just like, I can't wait to watch this movie again.
Yeah.
That's your validation. That's how you know that you've seen a masterpiece.
See,
Because you're
you want
not
to know?
thinking about none of that stuff. You're not thinking of none of the details. You're just thinking, I can't wait to watch this again.
Look, you want to know something that I really hurts BVS in a certain way is that the theatrical cut exists, and that we actually saw that, right? Like, I feel like if we would have got the ultimate edition in theaters, history would be a lot different. You know what I'm saying? Like, because just imagine seeing that version in theaters, right? Like the first time, right? Like, imagine how differently that conversation with your dad would have went.
It's because all of it, if you notice, and I noticed this right away when I was researching and looking at all the backlash. When you look at BVS, all of the complaints
We're
that
fixed.
people had of the theatrical cut in the theatrical cut, oh, it's clunky. It's all over the place. It's not consistent. It's not coherent. All of the complaints that movie got were all rectified when you watch the ultimate cut, because when you watch the ultimate cut, you don't have none of that studio interference. You don't have none of the stuff that the studio threw into it. I mean, it's again, this is when they really started meddling with Zack Snyder's material. Now, granted, the meddling in BVS is actually nothing compared to what comes later, but when you look at BVS, to your point about if we would have just gotten the ultimate edition in the first place, which goes back to what I was saying, which is that they should just release directors' visions in theaters right away so that you don't have to. It's almost like a the theatrical cuts of these movies now. It's like nowadays they come out and it's almost like you have to wait for it to come out on video, and it's like the way a video game is, where when you first buy a video game, you buy it and then
You wait for the DLC.
right, it's essentially the same kind of thing. It's almost like you're not getting the complete picture until the movie leaves theaters. And to me, that's a mistake, because the theatrical version of BVS versus the ultimate cut it's insane. It's insane how much more and how much better, and how that ultimate cut actually is. And again, there's a reason why once you've watched the ultimate cut, you cannot watch the theatrical cut again, because you already know that you're not that
It
you're
doesn't
missing
make sense.
so much, and it doesn't make sense, and it's incoherent, and it's clunky, and it
The
does this
theatrical
and it does
cut
that.
actually feels longer, even though it's shorter.
Yeah, I agree, because a lot of stuff that's in it doesn't make sense due to studio interference. Yeah.
Right. All right. So look. So you you come out of BBS super hyped, super happy. Ultimate Edition comes, is knocking your socks off. Right. Wait. Quick question. Did you ever show the ultimate version to your father?
Yes, we did watch the ultimate cut.
How'd that go?
Oh, he liked it. He liked it, but he still feels the same, that it's not better than Man of Steel. That
Okay.
it's on that level.
Man. Okay. All right. So you're loving the ultimate version of this movie, just like everybody else is. All right. And then we are going into Justice League, right? Now, how are you feeling about the Justice League and the casting for that? Like with Jason Momoa, Ezra Miller, right? Ray Fisher, right? How are you feeling mentally around that point going into the um the Justice League movie?
Well, from what I knew about it at the time, early on, uh, that first uh, that first Comic Con trailer was pretty dope.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't, I'm not gonna say that I wasn't hyped, because I was probably more hyped for Justice League than I'd been for any movie my entire life, coming off of Man of Steel and BVS. I don't think, I to tell you the truth, I don't remember ever being more excited for a movie than I was for Justice League.
Look, I was more excited for Justice League than I was for BVS. And for BVS, I drove from Las Vegas to Hollywood to go watch that movie at the Chinese theater. That was my first time going there because I researched. I was like, yo, what's the biggest theater that I can possibly see this thing at? Like the biggest screen and the most seats. And it was that one. And I literally drove from Vegas to Hollywood, about a 4 hour drive, you know what I'm saying? Like that same day to go see the 7 o'clock showing of Batman v Superman. So absolutely. And I was more hyped for Justice League than I was going in to BVS.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think there's ever been a movie in my life that I was more hyped for. I mean, and we're talking. I mean, there was Star Wars out at that time. There was a lot of stuff. I just, again, it. This is the problem, Skywalker. Justice, when you have that kind of, and I think this is one of the main reasons why we ended up where we ended up, because so many people were more hyped for Justice League than they were any movie in their life. Okay. And this is what, I mean, it just, I'm telling you, man. I mean, it was like, that just 2017 was just a bad year for movies, bro. I mean, it was just like, because I think Last Jedi was that year too. Wasn't Last Jedi that year? I just
I think it I think it was.
I
Let me
want
go
to
ahead and check.
say Last Jedi. It was like, so you got Justice League, you got Last Jedi. I mean,
It
it's
was
just
that year.
one disappointment
It
after
was that
another.
year.
I mean, I mean,
Yo, oh my God. Zod,
Skywalker,
Zod, you're so right. It was back to back.
back to back BS is
Yo,
what
it
it
was
was.
back to back. Right? Yo, I'm not gonna lie, right? Justice League low key made The Last Jedi worse, right? Because Justice League, like, I felt lied to, right? And then the Last Jedi, I felt disrespected. And then I was just like, wait a minute, Hollywood is just bugging right now. You know what I'm saying? I was like,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, because I had no, and I'm gonna be honest with you, I wasn't as hyped for The Last Jedi as a lot of my friends were, because I had a lot of friends who are big Star Wars fans, and they
yeah,
were super hyped for The Last Jedi.
I was hyped for The Last Jedi, yo.
I was hyped for it, but I was more hyped for Justice League.
Facts, right?
Justice League was the movie. Again, there was no other movie that I was looking forward to more, off the strength of it being, Zack Snyder and following up BVS, and that, there were rumors that Darkseid was in the movie. There was a lot of rumors, at the time, before the movie was released, that you couldn't help but get hyped and get amped and just be ready to go. I mean, again, I was over the moon. I could not wait to see this film. I mean, it was just one of those things where you want to get built up to a point where your heart doesn't have no choice but to break because
Yeah.
you are so emotionally invested. And that's a testament to where Zack Snyder left these characters at the end of BVS. He set the table for something that was just going to be I mean, again, I remembered when I told my brother that I thought BVS was going to be, the greatest movie of all time. But then how do you one up BVS? You put out a Justice League
Justice
movie
League movie.
and you have rumors of Darkseid appearing in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, maybe we're gonna revise our list, right? Wasn't there a thing going around? Oh, you're gonna revise your lists?
Oh, that was Jeff Johns, right?
Oh, God.
That's a hit.
All right. So for Justice League, I was with my father and my nephew. Okay, because we had started.
Wait, hold on. Before you go into watching Justice League, right? All right, now there's this rumors of Darkseid, right? But there's also rumors going around about, these reshoots and all this stuff after Zach tragically had to step away, right?
Oh,
So,
yeah.
when you're hearing about these, possible like reshoots and re-edits and all this stuff, right? Um, did you believe what was being said, right? Or like, were you, were you thinking that Joss Whedon and all the people from the studio were really just kind of trying to finish Zach's version?
I wanted to give everybody the benefit of the doubt because we had just gotten off of two really big Zack Snyder movies. And I think that um, part of the problem with Justice League was the marketing campaign was just so in your face all the time, and the way that they would literally come out and lie right to your face and tell you we're just going to complete Zach's vision. We're not taking away from Zach. You don't have to worry. Joss is just coming in to finish up for Zach. We're being told all these lies, and then you got people on YouTube channels perpetuating the lies and belittling anybody who questions, because there were a few people out there who were questioning
Infamous John Schnepp moment, yo, when he
why
said the
you would
truth.
why you would bring Joss Whedon in to finish up for Zack Snyder when technically you could have brought in somebody like, if he had time, you could have brought in somebody like Christopher Nolan just to finish it up, or bring in somebody else that you had on tap. Why would you have to go to Joss Whedon? Because Joss Whedon and Zack Snyder are polar opposite directors.
If you remember,
Totally
God,
different tones.
they were trying to sell it as like he did the big team up movie for Disney, right? So why can't he come finish our team up movie over here? That's how they tried to sell it.
Exactly. Exactly. It was ridiculous. They sold us a bag of goods is what they did.
you Absolutely right. I always kind of point back to that infamous John Schnepp moment where he went off and he was like, "Yo, this movie's being reshot, re-edited," and he kind of put the truth out there because he's like, "Hey, you don't bring on Danny Elfman to do a new score when you already have a score."
Now, that's the other thing, and I will say this. At first, I wasn't really I wasn't really bothered by them bringing Danny Elfman in, because Danny Elfman had done some good superhero soundtracks, and I really didn't. It really didn't hit me at that time, you know, ahead of the movie that this soundtrack uh, is going to totally be the wrong fit for this movie. I really wasn't thinking about it like that. I just was amped that we were getting another Zack Snyder movie,
Yeah.
following along with the tone of Man of Steel and BVS. That's what I was excited about. I
Yeah.
really wasn't. I really
That
didn't
was such
think
a
about it.
keen observation, right?
Right.
And it's almost one that could only be kind of stated by somebody who works in Hollywood, right? Because that was his breaking point. Because he actually wasn't really believing everything. And then when that happened, he was like, oh, no, 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 no. Like, he's like, no, there's no way. And if you really think about it, it makes perfect sense. If they're really just finishing up Zach's vision, why are they changing all of the music for the movie? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
In
it just makes
theory,
no
when you
sense.
think about it, now, in retrospect, after all the BS that happened, it really doesn't make sense. Like you always say, make it make sense. And when you actually connect the dots and think about everything that we know now, it didn't make sense. Just the idea of bringing Joss Whedon on, just the idea of bringing Danny Elfman in, didn't make any sense whatsoever.
Yeah.
Because if you were really just finishing up Zach's movie, there were things you could have did. Because wouldn't that have been more of an editor's job than another director to come in and act? I mean, I really don't get, but the way they spun it, I mean, the way they tried to make it, oh, Joss is good friends with Zach, and Joss is coming in and doing his friend Zack Snyder a favor. I mean, they were really laying it on thick. I mean, I don't know if you remember this, but this is what was going on. Like
Oh yeah.
they were literally coming out
They
making it
were
seem like,
praising Josh Whedon, saying that like, "Yo, can you please come south, yo?" Because that was around that time that they had the whole, "Oh, the Justice League is unwatchable" rumors, right? And
yeah.
so they were praising Josh Whedon to try to come save whatever was left of
Well,
that movie.
but that kind of came a little bit later. But I mean, before, in the lead up to the movie, they were making it seem like Zack Snyder and Joss Whedon hang out and have barbecues together, and like they were making it seem like they were best friends, bro.
Yeah. No.
That was the thing they were trying to do. They were trying to paint this picture like they're thick as thieves. Don't worry, Joss is gonna take care of Zach's vision and is gonna make sure that the movie is done the way Zach wants. I mean, it was, you talk about lies and complete trash. This is what we were getting. I mean, we were getting sold. Uh, oh my God! You talk about a bait and switch. This was like the worst example. Oh my God! Oh my God, dude! It's painful to talk about it because they were making that sniveling creep Joss Whedon look like he was best friends with Zack Snyder.
And they left Zach's name on this movie, even though,
Oh,
you know what I'm saying? Like, it's so crazy how that was even legally possible, right? Like, the fact that they were able to legally do that is pretty insane. And
I'm wondering though, and this was something that I had heard something about, that Zach needed his name to remain on the theatrical cut in order for him to be able to event, eventually release his version. Because there were some weird Directors Guild rules that if he would have taken his name off, he never would have been able to release his version of the movie.
Mm.
So I think there was something in there where he had to keep his name on this movie. So if that's the case, I can understand. And I find it even more amazing that Zach himself has allegedly not seen the 2017 theatrical cut of Justice League. I just find that fascinating, but at the same time, if it's true that he has not seen it, I'm glad for him, because I honestly wish that I never saw it. I mean, it's that bad.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. All right. So, obviously you're super hyped leading into Justice League.
Oh, I
right?
was so hyped.
And then
I had tickets. I had bought my tickets for this thing super early. I mean, I'd gotten my tickets as soon as they went on sale. I mean, I was so hyped. It was ridiculous. I was like, if there's one movie that it was the movie I was waiting for the whole year. I was so hyped.
Man, this was the movie I had been waiting on my
Christmas
whole
Day.
life, yo.
This
like
was
I was
Christmas Day. Yeah,
I was like, dude, I'm finally gonna get to see like Batman interact with the Justice League. Like, oh my god, yo, I was so incredibly hyped. All right, so your hype level is to the max, right? How do you feel coming out of Justice League?
I felt like I'd been punched in the face. I literally walked out of that movie, and it wasn't like the kind of punch in the face that you get, when you get into a fight with somebody. It's the kind of punch in the face that you didn't expect. It's like you got punched in the face because you were drunk or something. I mean, I walked out of the movie feeling like I kept trying to justify to myself that I'd watched something good. But it was like I was trying to rationalize it while we were walking around the parking lot going back to the car. I was like, oh well, it wasn't bad. It was okay. It was being in an abusive relationship. You're getting attacked by your spouse, and then a few minutes after the fight you're trying to rationalize and trying to remember that you love this person. You're trying to make excuses like, well, maybe it was my fault. Maybe, if I would have did this, then you're like going through all these different emotions and trying to figure out all these different ways to justify what you just witnessed. And to me, it was almost like, if you have to do that, then you had a bad experience. You're in a bad place, because no other Zack Snyder movie had I been like that. Every single other Zack Snyder movie, I'd walked out completely satisfied and looking forward to seeing the next movie. This movie, I had no desire to watch again.
Oh yeah, that was it for me. One and done. Yeah. Myself, I personally, I was drinking the Kool-Aid the whole time leading up to this movie. I was hearing about all these rumors and stuff about the reshoots and everything, and Henry Cavill's mustache, and I just thought it wasn't, I thought it was not possible for them to do this. I was like, there's no way they're gonna redo this Justice League movie in 5 months. I'm like, it's just not gonna happen. This is too big of a property. I've been waiting on this too long in my life. Excuse me. And I just didn't think it was possible. And then when I first saw Henry Cavill's face at the start of that movie, my heart just sunk, because I knew that it was gonna be some bullshit. And that's what happened. But even still, it was still weird because I knew it was BS, but I was still trying to tell myself that most of it was still Zach's, right? And I was like, they probably just didn't change up too much. It was probably just some stuff. But no, that movie's completely different. And so, yeah, my heart sunk. And like I said, when I walked out of the theater, I felt lied to. I was like, yo, they really did do a bunch of damage to this movie. And I was just totally towing that company line, not even thinking that it was possible. But oh, they showed me, but I really think that looking back, this whole Justice League thing is like, I mean, it's one of the most egregious things that's ever happened in Hollywood, but I think it's also one of the most important things as well, because there's been so much that has come out of just this one movie that's really shaken Hollywood to its core, I'd say.
And it's built a lot of friendships and social connections on levels that we can't even comprehend or catify at this point. Zach's this whole Justice League saga has brought so many people together. It's ridiculous.
Around the world, Joe. Around the world.
Haters and supporters alike. Let's just put it that way. I mean, we're all
It's all
united in the
engagement,
fact that
baby.
we're all united in the fact that it brought us together one way or the other. Whether we're for Zack Snyder's vision or against it, it doesn't matter. It's all brought you together, and you
We're all
kind of
just
got to look at
cogs
it
in the
that way.
machine.
That's right.
We're all cogs in the machine of Restore the Snyderverse. Right. Okay. All right. So look, you are doing mental gymnastics, trying to figure out how you're gonna like this movie, right? And right, then that translates into the juicy part of this conversation. All right. When did you first kind of start hearing about Zach having a director's cut, right? And there possibly being more to this movie?
I'm going to tell you, it was about, I would say, if I'm remembering correctly, timeline wise, I would say it was between 3 days and a week after seeing the movie in theaters. Because immediately after seeing Justice League, I was on social media trying to find people that felt the way that I did. Because we all have this tendency to want to have validation, not necessarily from other people because we care about what they think about what we think or whatever, but we want to know that we're not the only ones that feel that way.
Yeah, can't
be
the only ones.
And I remember having a conversation about it with in a Twitter thread with Fiona, the mother of the Snyder Cut movement, and
first Fiona name drop,
and Chris Chris Finaldo, Dr. Chris, and
Chris Finaldo.
I remember having a discussion with them about it, and I remember being.
Oh wait, Todd, are you saying that Fiona's not a bot?
I'm saying Fiona is not a bot. I'm saying Fiona was telling because Fiona has a personal friendship with Zack Snyder. I'm saying that Fiona was aware of the fact that Zack has a cut and that it was vastly different from what we got in theaters. And this was, not long after the movie. The movie is playing in theaters while this is happening.
Yeah.
Okay, we're being told that Zack has something, that Zack has a different Zack has a different movie. We're being told this while this Justice League is playing in theaters. Okay, this is what people don't realize. All the times when people were saying, well, Zack's movie's not finished. Zack didn't do it. The special effects aren't done. The movie's not ready. The movie this, the movie that, all these excuses. The truth is that Zack had a cut at that time. He had a cut at the time that Justice League was playing
Facts.
in cinemas. This is a fact. This is
Facts.
factual information. This is why Release the Snyder Cut happened, because you had a bunch of people talking on social media about Zack's cut of this movie. And I don't know, I know that Fiona was really, but again, Fiona was really, really instrumental. Dr. Chris was really, really instrumental in the birth of this whole thing. And then later on, Fiona created a website for SnyderCut.com, and that website was basically a compilation of all of the information that Fiona had gathered with some other people to research and to chronicleize all of the information that was available leading up to the release of Justice League. So you could see a trail of what led to this movie, and in turn, we're given proof that Zack had a cut and had a totally different vision for Justice League than what we got in theaters in 2017. So the whole thing was born out of people like me and you feeling like we were robbed. Like, what happened? Like, why do we have this movie that is nothing like what we were supposed to get? And we all came to that realization as the weeks went on, that because once we heard it from Fiona and then once you know that Fiona has a relationship with Zack, you know that what Fiona's telling you is the truth, and so now you're in this. And so by then, I don't remember exactly how soon after that the Release the Snyder Cut hashtag started being used, but I think it was, I want to say that it wasn't that much. It wasn't that long. Like it was.
Nah, it really
I
was.
would say that it was probably within a month of
Yeah.
within a month of release of the theatrical cut.
I was gonna say a few weeks. Yeah, it was like definitely within the first few weeks. It feels like.
Because people knew, and I'm being like I said, I'm being generous saying about a month because of the because of the way that it all transpired. But for me, I got connected with the right people right away. I mean, I knew I was, again, Dr. Chris and Fiona were like literally the first people that I communicate that I got to know, who were prominent in the movement. And then I started to meet other people, started to connect with different other personalities, so to speak.
Wait, one more question about Fiona.
Okay.
So if Fiona's trying to make an online purchase and she has to click the capture that says she is not a bot, would she be able to do that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right, cool. I'm just making sure.
Yes. Definitely. And see, my thing, the thing that gets me about all of this Fiona bot stuff, the things that I don't understand is because those of us that were there that know Fiona, not to mention the fact that there's actual video footage of Fiona that exists on HBO Max of all places,
and
on the Blu-ray.
and
on
at
the
DC
Blu-ray.
Fandom. And
DC
at DC
Fandom.
Fandom.
Yeah. There's actual video footage, but whatever. The reality is that my thing is that all my interactions with Fiona were nothing but positivity, and she is so kind and giving to everybody. If there's one thing that I want people to try to understand about Fiona, is that there is nobody, I think, who was better qualified to lead us in the way that she did. She had a way. She knew how to galvanize the entire fan base. She essentially brought us all together because she was the one who made it real for all of us. When you have somebody who is a friend of Zack Snyder telling you Zack has a cut, it's real, it exists, it's different from what we got in theaters. That's all we needed to hear, because we all knew we were robbed with whatever that was that we got in the movie theater. I don't even know how the movie we got in theaters even got past the editors. I don't know how you take a movie like that with Superman's face all contorted and messed up. I don't know how you release a movie like that. I don't know how you don't go in. I've seen people on the internet use deep fake technology to correct Henry Cavill's face in that movie. I don't know why, if somebody in their parents' basement on the internet can do it on YouTube, why a big studio like Warner Brothers couldn't fix that before the movie went to print. I don't get it.
I don't think they cared. I think
No, they didn't.
they didn't care how much they embarrassed Henry Cavill. Just think about how embarrassing that had to be for him. Right? Your first, go ahead.
Henry Cavill, and this is the other thing too. There were a lot of reports that came out at that time that, Henry Cavill, he supports Joss Whedon's direction for Justice League more than what Zack Snyder was doing. Henry Cavill is a fan of what Joss Whedon was doing with Superman in Justice League. Well, I mean, what are you talking about? He was a fan of his face being all contorted and messed up. You really think that Henry Cavill liked that? Every scene Henry Cavill was in, Henry Cavill looked like a bizarro version of Superman. Is that? I mean, you're gonna tell me he liked that?
It's facts.
I mean, I don't. The only scenes that Henry Cavill didn't look messed up in was the scenes that they left in the movie that Zack Snyder himself shot. But the majority of Clark Kent Superman stuff that was in Justice League was reshoots by Joss Whedon. And you could tell because Henry has the messed up face in every single one of those shots.
Yeah. The only ones that it's not there is in like the fight scene against him with the Justice League and stuff like that, right? Yeah, and a couple other scenes and stuff. But yeah, they're all the ones that Zach shot with his lenses. So most definitely. So look, you get in touch with like Fiona, Dr. Chris Vinaldo, right? And you start getting involved with the Release the Snyder Cut movement. When did you realize that this was something that was probably going to be taking up a bunch of your time?
Well, how I knew was just based on my willingness to commit to any campaign that was presented. The first campaign that I was a part of, the first major Release the Snyder Cut campaign I was a part of was the phone campaign, where I believe it was organized initially by Dr. Chris, and the idea was a bunch of us from all around the world in different time zones were supposed to call Warner Brothers and ask to speak to uh, an executive assistant of some sort and tell them that we would like Warner Brothers to release the Snyder Cut. And so this was something that we all did. It was very well organized, very well coordinated, and I know that a bunch of us participated in it. Now we got a lot of backlash just for this campaign,
Yeah.
and I remember
They were saying
being
that we was harassing Warner Brothers.
we were harassing Warner Brothers. There was a gentleman who went as far as to say that we were about to that the Release the Snyder Cut campaign was about to convince Warner Brothers that 40 people
40 people, yep.
want the Snyder Cut. It was a very, very again, this is par for the course. Anything that has to do with Zack Snyder is somehow it's always in vogue to crap on it. So I was a part of this phone call campaign. I did my thing. I actually did get to talk to somebody. I actually did say my piece, and whoever it was, the operator, the assistant, whoever she was very kind. She listened to me, drone on for a couple of minutes about Zack Snyder and about the Snyder Cut of Justice League. I don't even know if she knew what I was talking about, but this wasn't the only phone campaign we did, but this was the first one.
Yeah.
And I was really, really happy to be a part of it. So after that, and that was, by many metrics considered to be a success. And after that was done, I knew I was really going to be in it for the long haul. I mean, I was participating in anything and everything as long as I knew about it, and that's what it was like. I mean, because I donated to a lot of campaigns. There were campaigns all throughout. There were things we did, that cost money. There were things we did that was where we sent letters to the studio. I mean, we had so many different facets that we did to try and convince Warner Brothers to release this movie. It was, I mean, at one point we even wrote a bunch of letters to I think we all wrote letters to Walter Hamada at some
Yeah.
point too. And I mean, it was really, I have to say, I mean,
Will almost got through to his office and almost got to speak to him. You know what I'm saying? You remember that? Great. That was crazy.
yeah, I remember that. That was something else. That was something else. I remember speaking to a couple of different Walter Hamada's personal assistants.
Yeah, see?
And I got to the point where the lady knew who I was because I'd called a few times. So yeah, it was quite an experience as far as getting to know all these people and doing all these doing all these campaigns, getting interviewed by newspapers and internet sites. I mean, it was just I mean, I remember one time me, Chris Wong, Fiona, and somebody else was interviewed by the website The Ringer. We were interviewed about the Snyder Cut, and they were actually really the author of the article was actually pretty nice. He wanted to know why we were fighting for a movie that didn't exist.
Didn't exist, yeah.
I mean, because that was the whole thing. A bunch of goofy, quixotic comic book nerds are trying to get Warner Brothers to release a movie that doesn't exist.
X. That's
We
what
were
the
we were told
opening
that it
line
didn't
was.
exist. So we were told that it didn't exist so much that if we didn't have actual proof, we didn't know Fiona and and have actual you know be getting actual evidence based off of what Zach was telling her, we might have believed that there was no Snyder cut because we were constantly being told that there was nothing,
Yeah,
that it was a pipe dream. We were dreaming it up, and we were constantly being belittled by people on YouTube, people on social media, much like we are now, where we're asking for restore the Snyderverse. We're getting the same kind of treatment.
absolutely.
It's pathetic because
It's it's
you would
it's
think
very similar.
you would think you would think after the first time, a lot of these people would not be so quick to count out Zack Snyder and his army.
They are.
Why are you counting them out when we already won and got the Snyder cut?
They
What
are.
makes you think if we got the Snyder cut, what makes you think that we can't get the Snyderverse restored?
Facts, yo.
Zack
Look,
Snyder has said himself that the Snyder cut was the hard part. Once we
yeah,
get the Snyder cut, the Snyderverse is not as difficult to get, even though some people will tell you the opposite. Well, the Snyder cut was a movie that was mostly already done, whereas the Snyderverse is something brand new they'd have to do from scratch, so that would be a lot harder. But according to Zack Snyder, the director himself, the Snyderverse getting it restored would not be that difficult, as
once
difficult as it was
once
to get the
the
movie.
Snyder cut comes out, yeah. Look, I want to ask, because you were speaking about some of these people, around the time that you were really finding out that you were going to be doing this kind of like long term, around the time of that first phone campaign, who would you say was like most of the major players in the Restore the Snyderverse? I mean, no, the release the Snyder Cut community back then.
Well, back then you had Chris Finaldo, you had Fiona, you had Will Rollins, who was essentially the tre- I like to call Will Rollins the treasurer of the Release the
Treasurer, yeah.
Snyder Cut movement, because he was the money guy. He was the guy that he kind of handled all when we had big campaigns for banners and planes and stuff. He kind of facilitated the financial element. So you had Will. I mean, and then you had other people. You had Geo. You had Ben W. Of course, we had Mr. West Ashley, aka Pilly Swain. We had, I mean, there were so many great people, and then of course, you had people. You had other people on the other side. You had John Aaron Garza. You had Dave the Film Junkie. You had Chris Wong. You had, you know, oh my God, there were quite a few, and of course, and let's not forget the Mighty Film Gob. The Mighty Film Gob was there too, of course, and I mean, and he played a role. It was great. It was always great whenever I got a chance to go on a film gob stream. I was always excited, and because film gob is one of the goats. So there you had him as well. Uh, but when you ask me, of the people that I would think made the most impact and who were the ones that you know were the pillars of the movement, if I had to narrow it down, I would have to say I would narrow it down to Chris Finaldo and Fiona. Those two. I mean, I think they were the most. uh, they did the most. They did the most for the movement in terms of you know keeping everybody coordinated with what Zach was doing and what Zach wanted us to do as a movement, and of course Zack Snyder himself.
Absolutely.
Because what people don't realize, and I try to tell people this all the time, especially nowadays where you get people that say, well, Zach wants to move on and you guys won't let him move on. You won't leave him alone. And you keep pressuring Zach to do things he doesn't want to do. Why does he want to work with a studio that screwed him over like that the first time? It's like, people, what you're not understanding is Zach has been running the stuff behind the scenes the whole time. What you're not understanding is there's a reason why those of us that were in the movement from the beginning call Zach boss. We call him the boss because he's the one who sends down all the orders, all the commands. He's the one that says, "Hey, do a trending event at this particular time. Do this, do that, do this, do that." Zach knows, okay? And again, he had people like Fiona and Chris and all them so that, we could get the information. It was a conduit. And then, of course, you got Zach on Vero posting,
Yep.
black and white screenshots of, from the Snyder cut.
Stuff that wasn't in the version that we got, right? So
Right.
that's also another
Right.
thing that we're being told that this version doesn't exist, yet we keep seeing evidence of a version that we didn't see in theaters.
And now we know that the shots he was showing us are from the Justice is Gray version of the film. That's what we're seeing this entire time. And it really, it's kind of like you start to feel a certain way, because then there were other people that kind of came on the scene that came on the scene, and it just seemed like they wanted to take things over. So you had TPZ, which is made up of a bunch of individuals who were fortunate enough to have had coffee with Zack Snyder one day at a coffee shop, and now all of a sudden their whole lives revolve around, like, hey, we know Zack Snyder. So you've got a bunch of people. I'm not even going to name their names, but there's a whole group of them. And honestly, it's sad to me, because when I look at them and I look at what they wanted to do, they essentially wanted to take over everything. They wanted to take over the official RT Snyder Cut Twitter account. They wanted to take that account. They wanted to run stuff. They thought they were the they wanted to be the pillars of the movement because they had coffee with Zack Snyder. Okay, so imagine all it would take then, Skywalkers, for us to meet Zack Snyder at a coffee shop in Pasadena, and then we could come out and start trying to run stuff and act like we control everything because we had coffee with Zach. That's how ridiculous this whole
Wait, are you being serious? Was it really like a coffee meeting?
It was like a coffee thing. Yeah, they just happened to randomly meet up with Zach. It was I think they actually, I think the first meeting they actually had, they literally bumped into him. It wasn't like it was even planned. It was just something that happened by chance. Like when you say, y'all, I could bump into Zack Snyder at a grocery store.
It's the truth.
You're not lying.
Yeah.
It could happen like that. And then what happens? So say you meet Zack Snyder at a grocery store and you just start chatting with Zach. You take a couple of selfies with Zach and you post them on Twitter.
Hey.
Twitter. And so
hey, Still Nation, we in there. Still Nation taking over the whole fucking fandom.
But that's the attitude that these guys got. These guys got this attitude, like,
that's crazy,
because and so then they started having like regular meetups and things like that, and then they wanted to start taking over stuff, and they wanted to start running campaigns. But I got news for you: they didn't run anything. They just thought they ran stuff. And the thing was, as the movement progressed, it seemed like anytime uh, a big trending event or something would happen, if they didn't come up with it, they wouldn't want to endorse it until it was successful. Then, when it would be successful, you'd have a couple of those TPZ guys going back to Zach saying, I did this. I did this for you. I did
Think
this
that's
for
something
you,
that
Zach.
Will Rowland spoke about during our conversation.
So this is how you know it's true, because you're
Yo,
hearing it from multiple
look,
OGs.
look. I am being so honest, right? So that like every single person that I have brought onto this platform has said the exact same things. Everybody is from different parts of the world, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm talking about, we're in different countries, we're in different states, right? Everybody, I mean, they're in different age brackets, different races, sizes, creeds, color, everything. But yet the story continues to be the same. So continue, sir. I just wanted to kind of let the audience know that this seems to be a perpetual thing that is stated on here. I just interviewed Will Rollins, who Zod just vouched for earlier, and Will Rollins absolutely said the same thing, that they had somebody in there that would just kind of poke into the group chat, and then all of a sudden they would be reporting back to Zach as if they were the ones that was kind of running everything.
I'll tell you something. There was a T-shirt campaign that was happening. Uh, later on in when we were doing the movement, there was a T-shirt campaign, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I get a DM from one of these, because I was involved briefly with this T-shirt campaign, and all of a sudden, I get a DM from one of these TPZ dudes, and the guy sends me a message. He says, Zod, could you tell me about how much money y'all raised on that T-shirt campaign that you did? And I was like, huh? He's like, about how many T-shirts you sold and about how much money was raised for AFSP. And it hit me for a moment, because I was like, well, I don't. And this was, and just for full transparency, this was Mick D of TPZ. I just want to clear that out right now. I want to name that name for a very specific reason. So Mick D, okay, sends me this DM, and on the back of my mind, I'm thinking, why does he want to know that? The TPZ wasn't involved with this T-shirt
Matter of
campaign.
fact, that's the
But
same name Will Will named him. That's the
see,
same
you
name.
see what I'm
That
talking
is the
about?
same
You
name.
see what I'm talking about?
That is
So,
the same name.
so
Literally.
this is what happened. So then I'm like, okay, why is Mick D asking me about a T-shirt campaign that TPZ wasn't involved in? Why does it matter? Well, I found out later that the reason why Mick D wanted to know this is because Mick D would have taken that information, because I told him that I would have to get back to him because I didn't have those figures, because I wasn't running that campaign. I was just a part of that campaign. So I told him, well, I'll have to get back to you with the figures, Mick, because I don't exactly know. I don't know how many shirts were sold. And that's why I wore this shirt, because this Ray Fisher #7 Gotham City
Yep.
t-shirt is the shirt, and is front was the campaign that Mick D, okay, was asking how much money was made, and
Zod with
was
the deep
asking
cut.
where it was coming from. So I told him I'd get back to him, because I didn't know. I would have to go back to the person that ran that event, and I would have to go to him and say, hey, how much or whatever. But when I found out but I don't remember if it was because I talked to Will or I might have talked to Ben W or Geo, or maybe it was Pilly that I talked to about it. But I remember talking to one of those guys, and they were like, "Yeah, McD wants to know because McD wants to take those figures back to Zach and wants to tell Zach we did this for you." See, McD and TPZ want to take all the credit for everything that everybody does, even stuff that they're not involved in. So it doesn't matter if they're involved or not. They're going to go to whoever they can to get the information so that they can take it back to Zach and take credit for it. And this was a pattern. This is what they did all throughout. So basically, these guys didn't do nothing. The stuff that they came up with, they may have had a couple of whack trending events here or there, but they didn't really do all that much. I mean, their notoriety came from essentially having coffee with Zach, taking pictures with Zach, posting those pictures on social media, and acting like they were big shots, and everybody else was just like little minnows in the pond. I never could understand why they kept flexing like that. I never understood why it was so important when people were doing real work. You had Chris Finaldo doing real work, getting his hands dirty with every campaign, going into the weeds. It was Chris Finaldo who got Subway on board for the big campaign of feeding the hungry, where it was essentially you release the Snyder Cut to trend this much with Subway, and Subway will donate so many sandwiches. And to make a long story short, we did it within minutes. We would meet their trending demands in minutes. It wouldn't be a problem. And that was Chris Finaldo. That wasn't TPZ. That wasn't McD. That wasn't any of those guys that take all the pictures with Zach and act like they're better than everybody else. I mean, I at the end of the day, it was just kind of like I'm seeing a lot of people that could be classified as clout chasers, only doing it for their own benefit and to continue to try to make themselves look like angels in front of Zack Snyder. Okay, because here's the thing. Why do you have to take credit for everything? You don't have to wind up with every accolade. You don't have to wind up with everything time on the plate. It's like, listen, dude, spread some cheer around. There's enough to go around here. And at that point, it's like people, and it's like anytime you question them or actually try to reason with them, they get mad at you and tell you that you're just jealous because they have a friendship with Zach. You're just jealous because you haven't met Zack Snyder. That's the common response from these people.
Absolutely.
You're just jealous because you don't have a relationship with Zach. Well, I may not have a relationship with Zach, but I'm the one working all these events. I'm the one working with all these other people here as a collective trying to get this movie released. And you're sitting at the coffee shop taking selfies with Zach, acting like you know everything. Yeah. You don't do nothing.
Yeah, look, what's funny is that, ever since I've been on YouTube and social media in the capacity that I am now, right, I've obviously been getting pushback to my content or whatever, what have you. But I will say that after I had Pilly Swain, Mr. Wes Ashley on my channel, that's when I started getting a lot of pushback from TPZ supporters, right? And I will say that it is definitely odd that you have people that are supposedly on our side of the fandom, or part of our community, that really have such a problem with people that were there from the beginning coming out and telling their stories. Like, it has seemed pretty consistent that everybody that I'm talking to, their stories are lining up. And at this point, I think it's important for these stories to be heard. And I think that you guys can't be silent on these matters. It is very important. To release the Snyder Cut was a global campaign, right? That really changed the world, man. It really showed that, hey, if a group large enough puts their differences aside and comes together, that we could really do whatever we set our minds out to end up doing. And so to have any group trying to usurp others, and just try to put their own bid in, to make themselves look larger than other members of that community, especially when they haven't done as much. It's pretty disgusting, I'd say.
It's like when you take all the people who were involved in release the Snyder Cut, you could actually make up like a small country,
Yeah,
a small country of people. That's how many people this thing, you know, had, and as many people that worked on this. It wasn't just, you know, three or four people. It wasn't just a handful of people. It was literally tons and tons of people. And when you look at, you know, I mean, I don't know if this is a name that pops up a lot for you with OG talk, but there was an artist who was very, very, very well respected and loved in the release the Snyder Cut movement. His name was Ramesh De Silva, and
absolutely.
and Ramesh was the man who designed all the flyers, uh, promotional material for release the Snyder Cut. He was a godsend. He was absolutely brilliant in everything that he did. He was wonderful. And it almost brings me to tears, the way that he was treated and the way that he was pushed out when these people over with the initials sitting at the coffee table with Zach tried to force their dominance and bullied this man to the point where he had had enough and didn't want to do anything for the movement anymore. He was such a guiding light when it came to art, when it came to designing these flyers, when it came to, you know, you know, tactically putting this stuff together. He was brilliant. And anybody that you interview from back then should mention that name in the
Yeah,
same way that I just did, because
yeah,
this man was I'm in awe every time I think about him. Every time I think about Ramesh, I feel like jumping down on the floor like in Wayne's World and going like, I'm not worthy. I'm
right.
not worthy.
Yeah, I
Listen,
believe that name has come up in almost every interview. So, yeah,
so again, I'm not, I almost, I feel like, because these guys were just kind of moochers. They were just kind of, you know, it was like, it was as though I think they felt threatened by talented individuals in the movement. They felt like um, some of us would be able to jeopardize their spot with Zach if Zach were to somehow get word of the stuff that was really going on. Like if Zach were to know that these people were not necessarily the angels of the fandom. You know, like because when they're on Vero, Zack Snyder's preferred social media outlet, when they're on Vero with Zach, they are perfect angels. They're perfectly polite. They're very, everything is love, roses, and rainbows. But when they're on other social media platforms like Twitter, and if you cross them, or if they feel that you've crossed them, they will make you miserable, and they will try to bury you. And that's what they did to a lot of the OGs in the movement, because they didn't want us to be in the sun with Zack. They did not want us to get the attention of Zack Snyder in the way that they had it. Even though, Skywalker, it was never a competition, because none of us were trying to be sitting at a coffee table with Zack Snyder. None of us wanted to sleep over at the Snyder household. None of us were trying to connect with Zack on a one-on-one personal level. We were just trying to raise money for AFSP and to get the cut released. That's what we were fighting for. We were fighting for artistic integrity. We were fighting for Zack Snyder, the filmmaker, and the man, as well as, again, raising money for a good cause. And this was the problem. Like, you got these guys over here where it's all about them and all about their selfies and all about their, I've never once, and I wish somebody would point out to me what campaign was Mick D and the TPZ people. What campaign did they do? What was the major thing that they did? I mean, you really got to get one of these TPZ people on OG Talk, because I would really love to hear. I would really love to hear what one of them did other than bullying people out. That's what
I might try to reach out to Mick D and see if he'll come on and let me know. You know what I'm saying? What they were part of.
Because my thing is that I do not know to this day what exactly they contributed to the movement, aside from their coffee talk conversations with Zach, their selfies, and their unparalleled ability to control who Zach talks to in the movement. Those are the only things that I know of that they're actually responsible for. Okay, because when I think about people that arranged events, like I said, I think of the first name that pops into my head is Chris Finaldo. He arranged Chris Finaldo was responsible for so many events in the Release the Snyder Cut campaign that, honestly, the fact that he wasn't, at the premiere at Fandom, when he should have been on camera and at Fandom with Fiona. I really thank God Fiona was there, because without Fiona, there was literally no representation of anybody that actually did anything for the movement, because all the other people that were there were people that had either belittled or tried to work counter to what the movement was about, and then just kind of jumped on the bandwagon and saw opportunity once they knew that the cut was coming out. And because they were friends with a few of the they'd made friendships with some of the TPZ people, they were granted access. I'm talking about people like Dave the Film Junkie and Stephen Colbert and Chris Wong and those types of folks. they were basically because they were in good with TPZ at the right time. They were a part of they were a part of it, of the celebrations, as though they were actually really doing something for the movement itself. It's almost like so I'm trying to think of the best way to word this. It's like people who really were, I don't even want to call them bandwagoners the whole time, because it's like they were so negative towards everything that we did, with the exception of Chris Wong. I'm going to give Chris Wong a little bit of credit here, because Chris wasn't always like that. Chris was somebody who did participate in campaigns. Chris was somebody who was, being interviewed by websites and newspapers, right there with me and Fiona, which by the way is something that I find really ironic, because it was Chris Wong and Fiona who were interviewed by the Wall Street Journal when Ben Fritz decided to write his hit piece on the Snyder Cut. And we all thought that Ben Fritz was going to be the guy that was going to write the really good article sticking up for the Release the Snyder Cut campaigns, because he was the guy that was always standing up for film preservation and all that kind of good stuff. He was somebody that had a reputation for that. He'd actually written a couple of books on the subject of film preservation and fighting for films and all this other stuff. And he backstabbed us like you wouldn't believe. He asked all these questions, he said all these things, and he turned around and backstabbed us. But the point I'm making there is Chris Wong was really, in the beginning, Chris Wong was quite a contributor, and his YouTube channel was really, really, big for, Snyder Cut stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, and I can't even tell you. I mean, I interviewed Chris Wong a couple of times myself when I would do my radio show. I'd become what I consider to be good friends with Chris over all that time. And then Chris kind of went in a completely different direction out of the blue. And it just sort of, I don't know what happened to Chris. I don't know. Like he got in maybe I guess he got hooked up with TPZ as well. And I mean, I don't know if you're seeing a common theme here.
Yeah.
It seems like whenever you connect the dots and you look at the stuff that kind of goes south, it's because of these guys over here sitting at the coffee table.
Yeah.
And I'm not, and I don't know what it is about these guys. I mean, because again, you're throwing it in people's faces that you have this relationship with Zack Snyder, and you're essentially lessening the impact of things that everybody else is doing, and we're a collective movement, so therefore we should all be united in that front of what we want to accomplish. TPZ was in a unique position where I feel like if they would have reached out to everybody and worked alongside people instead of trying to push people out, I really believe we would have got the Snyder Cut a lot sooner.
Yeah. That, you know what? That is what I was just about to start asking you, right? Obviously, at first things are kind of running smoothly. You guys are getting your feet under you when it comes to organizing these events and stuff like that, right? At what point was it where you first started to notice the shift in things starting to go a little bit awry?
Well, for me, it was uh, when they forced Chris Finaldo out, when they pushed him out.
Mm.
For me, there was there was a lot of bullying going on behind the scenes. And I mean, I'm sure, Pilly could attest to this. There was a ton of bullying going on behind the scenes with these guys, and they had essentially ganged up on Chris Vinaldo and pushed him out. And at the time, I remember there was, there were some issues with, the Nerd Queens too, because the Nerd Queens came in and they kind of, and the Nerd Queens were cool for a while. And then they kind of aligned themselves. It's sort of the whole thing. TPZ kind of took over, I would say, more right around the time that the cut was announced. So, like when Zach did his Man of Steel watch party. I mean, I know a lot of this bullying and stuff that was going on behind the scenes was going on long before that. But it really, really came into prominence once the cut was announced. Once we knew officially from Zach after that Man of Steel watch party that we were getting Zack Snyder's Justice League, I would say that it all just hit the fan, because at that point you had anybody who hadn't declared their undying allegiance to TPZ at that point was thrown under the bus. Because I remember waking up, being super excited the next day, waking up, going on Twitter and finding that I was either unfollowed or blocked by a ton of people who were allegedly part of the Snyder Cut movement. People.
Wait, you were blocked the next day after the cut got announced?
Yeah, after the cut got announced. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It was
so almost as if you weren't needed anymore.
Right. And I'm sure, you've heard this. It's a very common theme. We were not needed anymore. We were pushed out and discarded. I thought that I had a relatively good relationship with the Nerd Queens. I thought that because I had supported them, I was a fan of theirs. I had defended them several times. I thought we were on the same team.
The next day, Zod.
The next day, I was no longer on their team. I had found, and it wasn't just them. It wasn't just the Nerd Queens. It was that whole crew. It was that entire TPZ, whatever all these groups were, it was just a massive, it was like spring cleaning the very next day. All of us, mainly individuals who were minorities, were essentially thrown under the bus.
You want to know what is so crazy too about you saying that? Because with me being on the outside and just being a fan and just following all of this stuff, I've always said that I felt like the day that the Snyder Cut got announced was one of the worst days for our community too, because we noticed the shift, right? Even though we weren't even behind the scenes. And so that's why, I think that with speaking with each of you guys, it's just been, such a highlighting thing for me, because it kind of validates what I feel like us on the outside felt, right? When that cut got announced, it seemed like everything changed. And then the more that I speak to you OGs that was really in this fandom, each and every one of you guys are saying the exact same thing about things changing significantly that day. And so I think that once again, I want to really highlight that for the audience, the consistent themes that are being heard throughout these stories. It's pretty clear in my opinion. So
Yeah, it's a few people that got lucky enough to bump into Zack Snyder at a coffee shop, and somehow they have this magic clout, or Zack crack, as Pilly likes to refer to it,
yeah,
and they're able to basically run roughshod and bully people in the movement that they deem unworthy, or not, or no longer needed. Like, I felt like the day after the cut was announced, I felt like it was, your services are no longer required. Like, it was an
almost like
unceremonious,
that Ann Sarnoff article, right? You
right,
almost like that same thing.
right, like an unceremonious dismissal, or a dishonorable discharge, so to speak.
Yep.
You really, you were useful when you were useful, but now you're not anymore. So you can go sod off. That's essentially how I felt, because then as things go on, and then you get into that's when you start seeing people who were talking crap and belittling everything about the movement being put into prominent roles,
Oh my
and being
god.
and being treated like they were supporters the whole time. Like I said, my heart sank when I saw Stephen Colbert from Screen
Yeah,
Rant
yeah, yeah,
on a live stream with Zack Snyder. My heart snapped, because
yeah,
at that moment,
yeah.
because, don't get me wrong, it's not like I say, and I want to make this clear to the audience and to everybody, that it's not that I'm jealous because they got to talk to Zack and I didn't. I feel like the reason I'm upset, and the reason a lot of other people are upset, is because this is somebody who who worked completely counter to everything that we did, and talked crap about every campaign that we ran.
And yet he's on a panel with Zach
And
chilling.
yet he's on a panel with Zach chilling, like and if you actually look at him on the panel,
He looked like he didn't belong.
yeah, completely. You could tell he's like, he's probably thinking in his head the whole time, I don't know how the hell I got here. To me, that was the straw that broke the camel's back for me. And that, I think, is a very, again, a common theme with a lot of these OGs. It's not that we were trying to get to that position where we're going to be on the red carpet with Zack Snyder. That's not what was about. What this was about was, we all did this together. It was a collective effort from everybody. And to see people that, you know, for lack of a better word, to see people who literally shit on everything that we did at every turn from beginning to end, to see some of those people on screen with Zack Snyder was not easy for us, because
No,
that's basically telling us that just because they act like they're anti, and then jump on the bandwagon at the last minute, doesn't mean that they're gonna get called out or held accountable for that. No, they actually have a better chance of ending up uh, on a Zoom call with Zack Snyder, because they're in the right place at the right time, and they're sucking up to the guys that met up with Zack Snyder at the coffee shop. So you see the picture that I'm painting here.
yeah.
It's
Look,
not.
look. I'll say this. Once again, right? I am speaking from somebody that was on the outside, just as an observer of all this stuff. And this isn't like a super personal attack on Stephen Colbert, but Zod is absolutely right. You would see the tweets and articles and stuff that he'd be putting out, and the things that he'd be saying right? And it was totally just like the antithesis of what we had going on. And this guy at several points made himself like a clear adversary to our movement. And so it was a bitter pill to swallow to see him on a panel with Zack Snyder, because we all knew what he had been saying the entire time. And
It's
so, once again, as an outsider, as somebody that wasn't even involved in this stuff behind the scenes, I can 1000% back up what these OGs that were in the fandom are saying. Like, this man absolutely was an adversary to our entire movement every step of the way. And then we had to witness him be on a Zoom call celebrating as if he had been there the whole time. It was pretty
acting like that.
despicable.
Yeah, it was pretty despicable. It was horrible. And, again, him and his cohorts, Dave the Film Junkie is another one. Every time Zack Snyder would post a black and white photo that we now know is, again, from the Justice is
It's
Gray
great.
edition, every time he would post a photo, Dave would put out a video criticizing it or saying something along the lines of, well, you can see here when you look at the photo that the special effects aren't done, and he's using black and white pictures to hide the imperfections because the work isn't done and it needs a lot of visual effects work, and it's going to cost a lot of money to to get the visual effects, and the visual effects is what can keep the movie from getting released. And but it's another picture from Zach, it's okay, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
All right, so this is what he was doing the closer we got to the release of the movie. All right, and he aligned himself with a few people, and Stephen Colbert was one of them. And again, to me, I'm not saying that you have to be, a diehard Snyder supporter. I'm not saying that you can't be critical of what was going on, but this is
You can't
but
be an anti.
but this takes it to another level when you literally have antis up there with Zack Snyder pretending like they were down for Zack the entire time.
Yeah.
That's just what I'm saying. All right. And just
Stephen
because
Colbert said some of the most egregious things to our fandom, yo.
and and
Really,
and
like,
and the fact that just because they happen to be in good standing with TPZ, which is another thing that I don't understand. Why would TPZ want these people who were clearly antis to be up there with their buddy Zach? That's the thing I don't understand. What is it about Stephen Colbert that qualified him to be up there with Zack Snyder, regardless of what his connection was to TPZ? That's why I say it's not what you know, it's not what you did, it's who you know, who you're friends with.
most definitely, yo.
I mean, I don't understand it. And for a while, like Pilly, I was cool with TPZ. I supported them too at first, because at first I thought they were doing a good thing, and I actually had some good conversations with one of the TPZ members, and I had what I considered to be a friendship with this person until I found out about some of the things that he did, along with the Nerd Queens, to push Chris Finaldo out of the movement.
See, look, you are kind of touching on the area that I was about to ask you about next, right? Because you were speaking about some of the bullying that has gone on, right? Can you go a little bit more in depth about some of the bullying that was occurring around that time?
Well, a lot of the bullying was happening behind the scenes. A lot of it was not, because you wouldn't see, for example, you wouldn't you wouldn't see the Nerd Queens go publicly on somebody like that. Be- because they, a lot of the stuff that went on with them and with, some of these TPZ people was behind the scenes. They would send DMs. They would be in chats behind the scenes, going at people in ways that can only be described as completely despicable and um, designed to basically make you not want to be a part of anything. They drove Dr. Chris, and I hate to say this because it is so counter to what the Release the Snyder Cut movement was about. It is so counter to what Zach is about. It's so counter to what we're about that it feels surreal in the most negative way to say this, but they damn near drove Dr. Chris to uh, contemplate taking his own life. And this is something that, to me, has had the most lasting impact on me when it comes to looking at the movement as a whole and looking at who the players were, looking at who was involved, looking at who did what to who and why. And to me, this is why I have such a hard time with TPZ today. This is why it's hard for me when I see TPZ post something or I see them say something. It's just like, you guys are hypocrites. You guys are clowns. You guys literally, nearly drove somebody to take their own life over your BS, and you're over here acting like you're over here flexing
And tagging
because
AFSP.
and tagging AFSP and acting like you're here for the cause. I mean, it's pathetic to me. And the fact of the matter is, you know, Zach doesn't see any of this because Zach doesn't know that this went on behind the scenes. Zach doesn't know what they did to Chris. They just Zach only sees what they want him to see, which is basically that when they're on Vero, they're angels, and when they meet up for their weekly, monthly, yearly, whatever annual, whatever coffee sessions they meet up for, they're all angels and look like they're perfect and amazing, beautiful people. I mean, I saw a picture they posted. One of them posted the other day of with Zack Snyder's sister. That's how deep this crap goes now. Like they're trying to make it look like they're practically members of the family. Like I was saying earlier, like they go to barbecues at the man's house. I mean, I just to me, it's hard to. Let me just say that it's not hard for me to understand why so many of the OGs bowed out after we got the cut. It's not hard for me to understand why they choose not to really uh, engage as much and fight, for restore the Snyderverse on the same level and with the same fervor. I mean, that's obviously why Chris Finaldo isn't here fighting for it. And we know Fiona has other things going on in her life, and we know a lot of they tried to bully her too. They bullied her out too and tried to dehumanize her and tried to make her look like she wasn't wasn't relevant because they wanted to take her spot.
Yeah, like being on the outside once again, that was a very odd time, right? When we saw what seemed to be a lot of infighting with people. Some of it spilled out publicly, with people attacking Fiona and things of that nature.
Oh yeah,
And
they tried to brand Fiona as a racist because they
yeah,
didn't understand what she was trying to say. She made so I can't even remember exactly what the reference was, but she tried to make some sort of reference to something, and essentially it was taken wrong, and a bunch of people ganged up on her
yeah,
and bullied her and tried to claim she was a racist, and essentially, you know,
yeah,
these kinds of things. Again, it was all out of jealousy because Fiona actually has a personal friendship with Zack Snyder. So because of that, they're jealous of that. So they're trying to push her out.
yeah. I mean, and I remember thinking at that time, like, if they can push Fiona out, they can push anybody out,
Exactly. Exactly.
right? And with me having a bit of a military background, I mean, it was just so obvious what was going on. They were coordinating an attack on someone like one of the absolute leaders in our community, right? The person that kind of galvanized this. And I think that, once they were kind of successful in doing that, they felt like they could push anybody out.
Right. It was essentially a coup
Yeah,
in a lot of ways. If you want to
yeah,
look at it in military terms, that's
yeah.
essentially what it was because again you had Fiona at the top, you had them bullying uh, Chris Finaldo to almost taking his own life. So you had him right underneath Fiona, and then you had everybody else, and we all just kind of filled in different spots, different roles. And again, I don't look at any of it as you know as anything more than these people wanting as much glory and
Clout. Yeah,
clout, clout, and admiration from Zack Snyder that they can get. Hence the term coined
that
by
crack. That
Billy
crack.
Swain, Zack Crack. That's why they're so triggered when you use the words Zach Crack. They get triggered when you say that because when you use Zach Crack, particularly on social media, that's what makes them come at you because they know that when you say that, you're speaking 100% the truth of what they're about.
Yeah.
They're about that Zach Crack. And it doesn't get any more real than that. That's what they're about. They will push anybody out that they feel like either threatens that spot that they have with Zach or is in a better position, in their opinion, with Zach than they are. And that's what it's about. This is why, and now that I think about it, talking to you and reliving all of this stuff right now for this conversation, now that I think about it, okay, uh, it kind of makes sense to me now why they they pushed us all out and basically discarded us because they they felt threatened
Yeah.
by what by the people that actually did stuff in the movement. They
Yeah.
felt
Oh,
threatened by the people
thousand
that
percent.
actually did the work, and it was really more about, and again, it's all about them. And you can tell
Zach
that,
Crack.
now by the way that they're flexing with all their pictures online with Zach's family, and it's like,
Very weird behavior. It's
it's
very
real
weird
it's really
behavior.
weird behavior, yes, because it's a bunch of grown dudes that are like up there in age, bro. I mean, we're looking at dudes that are in their late 40s, early 50s, acting as though because they're friends with Zack Snyder that we all need to bow down and kiss their feet.
Look, I'm gonna be honest too. You know, with them showing obviously that pattern of behavior of like bullying somebody to the point of almost contemplating like self-termination and stuff like that, right? And then and then I'm seeing one person that, Mr. West Ashley kind of identified as being like one of the main perpetrators of said bullying. When I see this person in a picture smiling next to Zack Snyder, it almost makes me like a little nervous, right, for Zack in that position, because people that kind of operate in that space, what are they willing to do to protect, their place next to Zack?
I'll take it one step further. I feel like a lot of these people want to wear Zack Snyder's skin. And I know that's disgusting, but that's how it feels to me.
Yeah, it's a little troublesome because I'm sitting here and the more that I've been talking to you guys and I've been kind of hearing these same stories reinforced over and over again.
It's like it all adds up and it's crazy.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
And then right, we get the pictures with Zack and everything, and then you get the response to the pictures and people saying once again, like, hey, you guys are just jealous. And
well, I couldn't believe the one dude posted some pictures on social media and then tagged you in it as though they were flexing on you. And this is all because of OG talk.
yeah.
Well, I'm happy to contribute because I'm very positive that they're going to have something to say about this one too. Guaranteed.
Oh, and that's fine. Like I said, I hadn't had any interactions with them until Mr. West Ashley came on, and then they started getting kind of called out a bit more directly. But in terms of all right, so now things are starting to kind of go bad after the cut gets announced, right? At what point did you kind of say that you were like not bowing out of the movement entirely, but at what point did you kind of just say, all right, I'm washing my hands of this entire situation with these certain people?
Well, one of the things that I tried to do was I tried to stay out of, like, I didn't go at them directly because I felt, I don't know what the word would be. It was sort of like like when you said about, when it was announced, it was kind of like the worst thing that could happen for the fandom at that time.
Yeah.
And the very next day when there was that massive unfollow blocking spree that these people went on.
Zod, it was the next day, Zod.
It was the next day.
That's crazy.
And I really feel like the reason it was the next day was because they had to shore up certain people. They had to shore up who they thought who they wanted to have
access
next to Zack. Who they wanted to have Zack. They didn't want Zod Rider to have access to Zack. They didn't want Mr. West Ashley to have access to Zack. They damn sure didn't want Chris Finaldo at the premiere. And I can tell you right now, if they would have had their way, there wouldn't have been no Fiona there either. But see, Fiona had the advantage
because she knew Zack.
Because she knew Zack before all these yahoos. See, she was really, truly Zack's personal friend prior to all of this. So there is no way that Zack wasn't going to include Fiona. And that, to me, shows you just how loyal Zack is. Because I'm sure he had these leeches whispering in his ear saying, trying to talk mess about Fiona.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly if that was the case, because on the one hand, I could see them doing that, But then on the other hand, I could see them maybe not doing that and maybe just trying to uh, bully Fiona out externally
Yeah.
so that they can be rid of her and not have to even bring it up to Zach, because again they want to look like angels. But I'm sure that they told Zach about certain people that they did not want to be a part of any celebratory events, which makes perfect sense, because again, you know, when you're all about that clout, you're all about that Zach crack, and you want to protect that spot, your highest priority is self-preservation. And that's what it is. They want to preserve where they are. They don't care about any of us. We're all people that we were basically used as foot soldiers, used as worker bees. And when all the hard work was done and all the campaigning was done, we were not needed. And we were discarded just as quickly as we were accepted. And only a few people were ingratiated into that little circle. And to add to the point that you made earlier about being a little bit scared for Zach, I agree. I think that that's the worst thing in the world, because now Zach can't shake these guys. This is a damn near. You ever see that movie? Misery?
Yeah. No, I mean, no, look, I'm being so honest, right? Like when I was sitting there and I was listening to Mr. West Ashley, wait, what stream was that where we were breaking down the pictures? Um, I'm not sure. It might have been on my channel, or oh no, it was on Sales channel, right? He was breaking down the pictures.
Oh yeah, that was the state of the fandom.
State of the fandom. Yeah, yeah, right. He was breaking down the pictures, and I got a real chilling feeling, right? Just sitting there hearing about this person. I think his name is Abdul. I think he said that was
Oh.
that was doing so much bullying, and then you see him smiling right next to Zack Snyder, fucking Zack Snyder, and he is fucking threatening to destroy people and all this other stuff.
I don't even want to. I don't even want to talk about him, because he is. I just yeah. The,
I got,
wow.
but
Yeah.
yeah, it was
I
just
mean,
it was a really
wow.
chilling feeling, right? That
Yes.
to really hear that somebody could be conducting themselves like that, and then you see them smiling right next to Zack Snyder when obviously AFSP is so important to him and things like that. And I don't think that he would be appreciative of him behaving like that, right?
No, see, this is the
You know what I'm
thing.
saying?
It's like they're acting completely counter to what Zach is about, and that's the thing that I just don't get. Like, I'm not understanding how anybody can act that way.
Yeah.
Like, and claim to be for release the Snyder cut and raising money for AFSP. This is how I knew, again, like I said earlier, that it's all about Zach crack and clout and maintaining that clout no matter what, at all costs. This is why I had Mick D coming to me about the totals for those shirts. This is what it's about. It's about them having this me attitude, and about them wanting Zach to recognize them for everything. Like one of the most um, common statements that these people would use when they would talk to Zach would be, "Zach, look what I did. Zach, look what I did." You understand? They're not. It's not about the collective. It's not about the movement. It's look what I did.
Yeah. I mean, I was gonna say, just hearing about all of these things and what happened behind the scenes, it really just validates what we felt as a fandom on the outside, right? And I would even say something else that we noticed that kind of started, showing us some severe red flags, right? Was when we started having all these conventions and stuff like that, and there were so many faces that we had never seen before, right? That were involved, and so many people missing that we felt like should have been there, right? Like we had the one convention, the one big one. I forget the name, but Film Gob wasn't on there. And, there's just like all these faces of people that we as a fandom didn't really know. Right.
Though
And
those
it was
people were just, yeah, those people were just in good with the right people at the right time.
right. And I was going to say, even, with the whole DC fandom thing where you have, what's his name? Dexter from TPZ or whatever. He's on there. And like, he was on there before Fiona, correct?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I don't know, we had no idea who this guy was.
I will say this about Dexter. Dexter's always been a complete gentleman. Dexter was somebody who I had some conversations with in the past, and I will say that he's never been anything but kind to me. So I can't really, I can't really, downplay him in any way because I don't really know of anything that he actually did. Uh, but with that being said,
Nobody,
I don't know what
the
he
problem.
actually did for the movement either. To be honest with you, I don't know.
Yeah, and that seems to be the problem, right? Is that from our perspective, we have no idea who this person is, but yet we see him before we see Fiona.
Yeah, that was disturbing in a lot of ways.
Right. And so, the person who actually curated the whole for Snyder Cut.com, the whole thing, right? How does somebody like that get in front of Fiona? And it's the same thing like with these conventions that were being held. Like, who the hell are some of these people? Like, we as a fandom, we know what content creators we've been watching, right? And who the real movers and shakers are in terms of content creation. And at the same time, there's just so many people that were part of this thing that, a bunch of us had no idea about whatsoever.
Exactly. It was, believe me, it was. I'm 100% with you. It really was bizarre. It really was. It was like you're seeing a you it's like it was like it's like going to a family party to celebrate, for example, go to a family party to celebrate your parents' anniversary,
Yeah, like a
and
birthday party,
and you
and you
don't
don't.
and you don't recognize anybody at the party.
Yeah, yeah, that's the perfect analogy. It's like you were going to a birthday party for a family member, and you don't recognize anybody there. And you're like, wait a minute, like who the hell are you guys? And then they're all trying to act like, yeah, we're cousins, right?
And then you see the guy, and then you see the one guy who was feuding with your family the whole time, sitting up there at the table with your parents.
right?
It's like, what?
Doing,
Why are you there?
and he's making the toast and everything, right? You know what I'm saying? Like trying to toast to everybody. But yeah, it's just I can definitely see how this stuff was playing out, and just how it, because it was strange. It was very strange just watching all these things play out. So we're towards the end of like, your when you're kind of dealing with these people. Um, after after you were kind of removed from that situation a bit, what were some of the things that you were seeing happen after that?
Well, that's when you started to see, the celebratory stuff started happening where you would see uh, plans for, conventions and different events and different things that, again, would be a bunch of people who really didn't do anything, who were just, in the right place at the right time. And again, I really don't know how the hell that happened, to tell you the truth. I mean, I remember having a conversation with Pilly close to that time, and we were both like looking at each other like, what's going on? How does this happen where, you know you've literally got antis on TV with Zack Snyder? How does this happen? Like, honestly, like I told you, and like I said earlier, guys, I'm not giving any disrespect to any of the people that had Zack Snyder on their YouTube channels, or were on the at the premiere. That's not, I no disrespect to any of them. I just, to me, when you see antis up there with Zach, it would have been like, it couldn't have been any worse if you would have had Jody from Jody's Corner up there at the table with
Yeah.
them.
Right. Yeah.
It was the same thing. It was the same. That's what Stephen Colbert was to the Snyder Cut movement at that time.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. I 100% agree. Absolutely. There were so many statements made by this man that was just going against us, and
In every way.
was making fun of us, making light of us, right? And then to see him up on the panel chilling, it is just like, wow, like it's really strange.
It was hurtful. It was hurtful in so many ways. It was very much like, it felt like a slap in the face to all of us who had been there since day one, fighting for Zach, fighting for Zach's vision, fighting for AFSP, doing the right thing. And again, it's hard to come back from something like that. It's hard to look at that and be like, and think that you're it's like you don't expect yourself to be, you never expect yourself to be up there with Zack Snyder, because everybody who actually did the work can actually humble themselves and know their place. But to see a guy like that up there,
Yeah, yeah.
I
Right.
don't
Like,
know.
yeah, like, I mean, right. Even now, right, with this whole restore the Snyderverse thing, you have people saying, "Oh yeah, like, you know, they're trying to talk to me as if like me trying to get Zach on my channel is my end all be all." Right now, let's just say that that was the case, or I was trying to get Zach on, right? If that was the actual like goal of mine. If I didn't get it and then I saw Seal get the interview, I'm gonna be happy for Seal, right? Because I feel like one, Seal deserves it, you know what I'm saying? And that's the homie, and I would be happy for him, right? But at the same time, that's like you were saying, if I was to see Zach go on Jody's Corner channel, you know what I'm saying? I would be like, wait a minute, like what the hell?
Well,
That
a better comparison now would be to say that if you were to, it gets announced that the Snyderverse is coming back, and then you see Zack Snyder on Matt Jarbo's channel.
yeah, fact.
Okay,
They,
at that point, and yes, I am saying essentially that Stephen Colbert is essentially the equivalent of Matt Jarbo. Okay, because Stephen Colbert, what he did was he crapped all over the movement, all the way up until he knew that the cut was coming out. And then when the cut was finally announced, then all of a sudden he does a 360-degree turn and
Change.
started acting like he was there for it the entire time.
Yeah.
Even though there's documented tweets out there where this man actually says that he was never part of the movement, he never supported the movement, he doesn't like the movement.
Yeah.
Listen, it's all out there, okay? And yet, at the right time, he turns around and slithers like a snake and gets up there and gets to share a panel with Zack Snyder. How do you think that makes people feel who worked the entire time for Zack's vision, for AFSP, never asked to have Zack Snyder on their channels, never even thought about having Zack on the channel, and now we're getting told that we're just a bunch of jealous people that because we don't have that kind of a relationship with Zack, so that's why we go at TPZ, because we're jealous of them because they have that relationship with Zack. Well, that's completely untrue because Fiona had a better relationship with Zack than all y'all, okay? And Fiona, you figured out a way to push her out too.
Yeah.
So
So
what does
it
that
didn't
say?
matter. Yeah, it didn't. It didn't matter. You know what, Zod? Allow me to lay something on you. All right, give me a second to get this out
You got it.
because I just thought about this shit. I just thought about this shit. To me, what happened with TPZ and a bunch of these people that were involved in pushing everybody out, it's almost as if like they did the exact same thing that Warner Brothers did to the Snyder Cut, right? They wanted to ruin everybody who was involved in kind of making it, right? Um, they cut out the minorities, right? They cut out what seemed to be almost all the minorities, right? And
Except maybe Dexter.
yeah, but you have to have one. You have to have one. I mean, I'm gonna just lay that out there, right? You gotta have one as a quota, right? But for the most part, from what I see, most of the people that got pushed out were minorities, and the people that didn't go along with just whatever that they had, their own little nefarious plans, and they use their outlets, right, to kind of bully and push other people out that didn't go along with their agenda. It's just like what Warner Brothers did.
It is. It's the same thing. It actually mirrors it in a very poetic way.
I didn't even realize that until just now, right? That it kind of mirrors exactly what happened with Zach's movie.
Yep. Because think of how great things would have went if we didn't have that type of division. If we didn't have people trying to bully people, if we would have just had people trying to work together and utilizing various people's talents for the better. You see, this is what it all comes down to. When you have talented people, when you have people that are able to motivate and get the crowd together to say, okay, we need to do this. We need to do this trending event. We need to do this fundraiser. We need to get this going. I feel blessed and honored to have been a part of Release the Snyder Cut. I made a lot of great friends. I met so many people. I made so many connections. And while there's some people that I was friends with when the whole thing started and I'm not friends with anymore, I still value the amount of time that I spent with those people. I still value having gotten to know Chris Wong, having gotten to know John Aaron Garza a little bit, having gotten to know even Dave the Film Junkie. I don't hold any personal animosity towards any of these people. My issues with these people have been how they have conducted themselves. And I think that's a very important distinction. You don't need to attack people personally to be uh you know disgusted by the way that they've handled themselves or by the way that they did things. I mean, the only person where it got kind of personal for me was Stephen Colbert, because of the way Stephen Colbert went at the movement, because of the way Stephen Colbert went at me, because of the way Stephen Colbert's wife went at me. That's the only reason. But all these other people, I can't even say that it's personal. Like, they mention, all the bullying. Other OGs will mention all the bullying and stuff that Abdul did. And I got to be honest with you. While I don't agree with what Abdul did, and I know what Abdul did, and I'm very aware of what Abdul did, every conversation I ever had with Abdul was a cordial and polite one. So I can't look at Abdul and say Abdul is the enemy based on my personal experiences with Abdul, but I can at the same time, by that same token, be offended by his behavior and be upset with the way that he treated another friend of mine, by the way he treated other people that I knew in the movement. But you see, this is what it is. You are a product of your experiences, and all of this comes together to form your views on all this stuff as a whole. So for me, again, I don't know the TPZ people personally. I don't know them on a personal level, so I can't sit here and talk about them on a personal note. But I can take some of the things that they've done personally because it impacted me in a negative way.
Yeah.
So, it when you look at this, you have to be able to make that distinction. Because people say, all the time, well, Zod, I get criticized all the time. Oh, Zod, you always talk crap about the nerd queens, and I talk about the nerd queens because I was aware of some of the things that the nerd queens did, and I didn't agree with the things that they did, particularly when they got connected with TPZ. But I don't have anything personal against them because I don't know them on a personal level. And that's what people need to understand about all of this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You can be mad and you can be upset about certain people, but unless they've done something personal to you, you're not going to have anything personal against them.
Absolutely. Yo, that is a great distinction, right? Because I don't know any of these people personally. And at the same, and my problems with it, have been the effects that their behavior had on a community that was very near and dear to me, right?
Yes.
And I do agree that, probably had not some of these things been going on, we might have gotten the Snyder Cut quicker, and we might not have had the campaign for as long, right? So at the end of the day, that's where my frustration comes with. It's from a place of like, their actions affected my cause.
Right. And they made it all about them,
Yeah.
which is not something that you ever should do when you're in a movement, a collective movement made up of people from all over the globe.
Yeah.
Okay. This is not something that you're doing yourself. So when these TPZ guys go to Zach and say, "Look what I did. Look what I did. Look what I did." That's completely disingenuous. And that also, you know, undervalues the movement as a whole, because now you're making it seem like only these people over here were responsible for everything. Nobody else really matters. And that's why what you're doing is such an important thing. Your OG talk is one of the greatest things on YouTube, because you're getting the stories from the people who were there. You are getting the truth. You are getting everything that happens to line up. Once again,
It's
everybody's
crazy.
stories are
It's
lining up.
crazy,
So,
though.
you
It's crazy.
know, it's like if there's a gap in the story, if there's something that doesn't add up,
That's exactly
you'll
no.
be like, "Oh, okay." But no, you're
It
not
gets filled
seeing
in
that because
later.
there's not nothing like that.
Hey, no, look, it's like this is what it's been like, and why a lot of these conversations have been so eerie. And I feel like I'm almost talking to the same person over and
Every
over
every
again
show. Every
because,
show.
yeah, because one, not only did so many of us have like the same kind of reaction to Man of Steel and BBS and all that stuff. Excuse me, but also, you know, each of you guys' stories sound so similar, and yet they're so unique at the same time, right? It's like it is the same timeline, but then each one of you guys adds something different to that timeline that just fills in the complete story. But the overarching story is always the same.
Yes. Yeah, and I don't expect anybody else that you talk to be any different. I think you're gonna, and by the time this is all over and you've interviewed all of us, you'll essentially be at the point where you'll be an expert. You'll know what people are gonna say before they say it.
Facts. I'm gonna be like Batman on the Mobius chair. You know what
I
I'm
mean, I
saying?
mean, it really is compelling to know that everybody's story has lined up, and the fact that it has lined up
It's uncanny, Zod.
is what
It is uncanny.
is what you is this is how you know, that what you're being told is the truth. This is why you know you're getting a true account of events, because you would have vast divergences if people are making things up.
Absolutely, absolutely. But that hasn't happened yet. Like
No, no, no,
literally.
no,
You
no.
know, after you guys finish this episode, I encourage you to go back and watch the other ones, yo, one through
If you
four.
haven't if you haven't already, I highly recommend you watch 1 through 4.
1 through 4,
Absolutely.
and they've only gotten more and more revealing as we went along, right? It just seems like each one of you guys just keeps building off of one another, and we just seem to keep getting more and more. So I think it's a wonderful thing, yo. I think it is a good thing that this stuff is coming out now, especially with us being on the cusp of restoring the Snyderverse, because I have a feeling that a few of these same players might try to do the same thing that they did last time. And but restore the Snyderverse is a much different animal. It's a much different beast. And I feel like with us not having like a centralized leader per se, like we did last time, it is going to be harder for them to try to control that narrative, especially with people involved in kind of knowing what's going on that's watching this content. Hopefully we can keep pushing this stuff out, keep pushing this story, and hopefully it gets to the ears of the people that it needs to get to, because I'm a little worried. I'm gonna be honest, like
This
I'm
is the series.
I'm
This
not
is
gonna
the
lie.
series of. This is the series of streams that Zack Snyder himself needs to watch.
Yeah.
I'm telling you the truth right now. And when you say centralized leader, I will say this: Fiona, as galvanizing as she is, and as wonderful as she is, and as the fact that all of us see her as a leader, the
Yeah.
greatest thing about Fiona was she never saw herself as the leader.
No, absolutely.
At no point.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I can attest to that too, just by like how she used to talk and tweet and stuff like that, right? It's just funny though, because um even though she didn't feel like she was, right? The fandom kind of looked at her like that, which is like how I was saying before, why it made it so key that when they tried to push her out, and when they did end up pushing her out, it was like, okay, anybody can get gone now, because if we're all looking up to her, and that just happened, and nobody makes a big fuss about it, right? Because it just kind of came and like went, right? All these things just kind of came and went. And with us not having a lot of this behind the scenes information, um it made it kind of hard for us to put our finger on what was really going on, even though we could all feel something was off.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just a shame because again, Fiona is a salt of the earth person. I can't say enough wonderful things about her. Again, all the exchanges I ever had with Fiona have been positive. She's a wonderful person. Again, Dr. Chris, Dr. Chris is also a wonderful person. He was very, very kind, very, very, uh, very, very strong, opinionated guy, very, awesome. Just an awesome presence to be around. And again, this is what you know, I guess to me, like I said, the two people that stand out the most to me are Fiona and Dr. Chris. Because to me, it's it's those two people that essentially, you know, built the framework for everything. And it just went on from there. And it's so amazing. And it's such a beautiful thing because for all the negative stuff that went on behind the scenes and for all the things that the trials and tribulations that movement went through, at the end of the day, the goal was accomplished.
Absolutely.
Okay, so none of the clout chasers and people that were snorting the Zach crack derailed anything because we got the Snyder cut. We raised almost $500,000 for AFSP, raised almost $1 million for AFSP to this point. I I can't think of anything else. It's like, how can you not be proud of something like that? Warts and all. I mean, it's a beautiful thing. And
Absolutely.
restore the Snyderverse is just expanding upon that.
Absolutely. Zai with the beautiful message to the other OGs. You know what I'm saying? Like, even though this thing might have warts on it, we still did it, and you guys have all the reason in the world to be proud of what you did, right? So, yo, Zod, this whole episode has been so enlightening, man, and it's been super dope. You know what I'm saying? Having you on here, telling your story, yo, and really just laying bare the cupboard. You know what I'm saying? Because um, these things need to be talked about. They need to be discussed. Um, if we do not know our history, we are doomed to repeat it. And so, when I kind of look at the landscape now of what's going on with Restore the Snyderverse, I'm seeing a lot of the same kind of moves happen right now, and that's why I think it's very important that we kind of highlight what just happened last time, so that just maybe we don't really allow that to happen again this time.
Right now, we're dealing more with um, antis, move on crowd kind of people. There's a lot of nuances now in terms of the kinds of people we're dealing with. I would say, I'm not going to say that it's necessarily worse than what it was with Release the Snyder Cut, but it's not necessarily better either. It kind of mirrors it in a positive and negative way.
Yeah,
All of this, it just mirrors it. It just mirrors itself. That's why it's very possible that the same things that happened in Release the Snyder Cut could happen here. The closer we get to restoring the Snyderverse.
absolutely, absolutely. All right, so Zod, before we get out of here, you want to let the people know what you got coming up. You know what I'm saying? We are shooting this right after San Diego Comic-Con. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, it's I'm gonna be releasing this pretty soon. So yeah, if you want to let the people know what you got coming up this week, this should be out pretty soon.
All I'll say is not really to date the episode or anything aside from it being shortly after San Diego Comic Con, but I will say that I'm currently writing a book about the Release the Snyder Cut movement and the Restore the Snyderverse movement. You're going to have you're going to get a lot of stuff from me in that book that uh, I think you're going to be really surprised. And the book itself is, I'm taking a very, very, very positive approach to the book. And what I mean by that is, even the people that I disagree with, even, for example, I'll give an example, some of the TPZ people, and a couple other people that you would think that I would be wanting to depict rather negatively are going to be properly represented in this book for what they did positively, because I'm currently writing a book that is going to reflect the history, but is also going to be an attempt to bring the fandom together. So look forward to that. That's a big project that I'm working on, and it's probably going to consume the majority of my free time for the next year, I would say, because it's a big project.
Absolutely. And look, I want to thank you, Zod, for not only for embracing me as I have tried to find my footing in this YouTube community, right? But for being a friend, right? And for also what you're continuing to do with just trying to help the cause in whichever way that you can. And I think that this book that you're gonna write is very much needed. And we haven't had a book written from like a pro Snyder person as of yet that I can think of. And so having that done by somebody that has been in our community from day one is something that's very important. And I don't really want to let that go understated. So I really appreciate you, sir, for what you've done for the community and for me personally, right? And I want to thank you for coming on my platform and for sharing your story, because I really think that it's helpful for the restorative Snyderverse peeps, and as another way of kind of chronicling what happened for people that may not have been there, right? You know, we have people that are newer to the fandom and might have kind of got on board after the Snyder Cut came out, right? And they need to know about this stuff too. So I appreciate you, sir, wholeheartedly for coming on this platform and for telling your story.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Skywalker. You are an asset to this community 100%. I am so thankful to know you and to call you a friend. And I just can't thank you enough for having me on your platform. It's been an honor and a privilege. And I'm looking forward to more collaborations. So thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. You already know, you know. And for the people that don't know, you know what I'm saying, we are half of Voltron, you know,
One half of Voltron, defenders of the Snyderverse, yo.
The Snyderverse, you know what I'm saying, with our other two members, Mr. Sil Abdul and the president, Abu Nas.
Abu Nas.
You know, they were here today in spirit, you know. But as for me, you know, and Zod, this has been OG Talk with Skywalker the Jedi number 5. You know, and we're gonna get at y'all next time. All right, y'all be safe.
Peace.
Peace.